everybody. This is the Wednesday, May 10th a.m. session of the Portland City Council. Carla, please call the roll.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Udaly.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. The usual preliminary notice. The purpose of council meetings is to do the city's business, including hearing from the community on issues of concern. In order for us to hear from everyone and to give due consideration to matters before the council, we must all endeavor to preserve the order and decorum of these meetings. To make sure that the process is clear for everyone, I want to review some of the basic guidelines, which I hope will help everybody feel welcome and respected and safe at the meeting, and also ensure that decorum is maintained. There are two opportunities for public participation. First, we have an opportunity for people to sign up for communications to briefly speak about any subjects they wish to address. These items on the communications calendar must be scheduled in advance with the clerk's office. Second, people may sign up for public testimony on the first readings of reports, resolutions, and ordinances. If you sign up, your testimony must address the matter being considered at the time. Please state your name for the record. We don't need your address. If you're a lobbyist, please disclose that. And if you're here representing an organization, please identify the organization. Individuals have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light's going to light up, and when your time is done, the red light will come on. Conduct that disrupts the meeting, for example, shouting or interrupting others' testimony or interrupting during council deliberations, is not allowed. People who disrupt the meeting face ejection from the meeting. If there's a disruption, I'll issue a warning that if any further disruption occurs, anyone who's disrupting the meeting will be subject to ejection for the remainder of the meeting. Anyone who fails to leave the meeting after being ejected will be subject to arrest for trespass. If you'd like to show your support for something, a simple thumbs up will do. If you want to express that you don't support something, thumbs down is good. Thanks, and we'll get started with council communications. Carla, please call the first item.
Item 455, a request of Standard Schaefer to address council regarding emergency medical services, fire, and Portland Police Bureau crowd control policy.
Good morning.
My name is Standard Schaefer, and I'm with Empower Portland. I'm not here to talk about EMTs today. I'm here to talk about recent police actions regarding protests. It's important for you guys to realize that trampling our rights has real live consequences. The current social science shows that riot cops showing up at crowd control escalates the situation. I realize that you guys think that you can just strong-arm people into submission, but unfortunately you're radicalizing a lot of the population. If you want to know where the anarchists come from. Next thing I need to say is that we've had several witnesses coming forward with statements about police entering the march at the start. I've seen video of police interfering with protest organizers who told them, by the way, when we negotiated this permit, we didn't want cops in the middle of the march, and there they were. The police intimidation is pretty widespread at this point at protests. We had people being pulled over before the 82nd Avenue incident on Saturday, being told, being pulled over for petty violations, petty citations, and being told that they are attracting too much attention on their way to the protest. This interference with the right to assembly is a problem. We need to stop interfering with the infrastructure of the protests themselves. We have got cops intimidating street medics. Excuse me, Mr. Wheeler, are you listening?
I'm listening.
Thank you. Journalists are being intimidated. Mobility vehicles are being taken out of the marches, endangering disabled people. Cop watchers are being harassed and detained, and legal observers too. This last one particularly concerns me because if it wasn't for legal observers outside the Portland building when I was arrested, during the incident in which I was accused of robbery too, I would probably be in jail. So people's lives are being affected by this stuff, and we need to respect the rights of the legal observers. We need to get real training around what's going on at crowd control because the police don't seem to know the rules about cop watchers. They don't know the rules about filming the police, and they don't seem to respect legal observers. These are the people that are the last bastion of hope for us who are worried about police accountability because the city has already given away its authority to rein in the police. We're told that phone calls make a difference, but we have police and police commissioners dissembling and not giving accurate information to the media. So when the media-induced phone calls come in, they're very exaggerated. We're not listening to the people on the ground who actually document and file reports. We're filing public reports every time there's public input available for community input on crowd control. We don't even know where it goes. We never hear back from it. It's time to reopen the crowd control policies and include these kinds of concerns, ones around protecting legal observers.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 456, request of Melanie Plott to address council regarding moving Portland to 100% clean energy and threats to the city from climate change.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's Plout, like sauerkraut.
Thank you.
Mayor Wheeler, Council, my name is Melanie Plout. I'm an OBGYN physician. I retired last year and decided that climate change was my #1 priority, and I've been a volunteer with 350 PDX. In the last few months, I've met with staff, all of your staff, to talk about the Carty gas plants and the transition to renewables. You've probably heard this quote before: "The planet isn't dying, it's being killed by people, and those people have names and addresses." Today, I'm asking you to act bravely to be sure that those addresses don't belong to those of us who live here in Portland. On June 1st, the council will vote on the 100% by 2050 plan put forth by Mayor Wheeler. I urge you to keep this resolution strong. You may already be hearing from those in industry who say it isn't feasible for one reason or another. This simply isn't true. All it takes is the will to do it. In order to keep our beautiful planet livable, we need to enact a fossil fuel freeze as soon as possible and start an immediate transition to renewable energy. I'd like you to think about these dates for a minute. First of all, 2050. Knock wood, we will all live that long. And by then, we need to have decarbonized our electricity, transportation, and heating sectors in order to limit warming to 2 degrees. Next, 2100. It sounds like a long time away, but there were babies born yesterday who will likely see that date. I've delivered thousands of babies in my time. If we don't act bravely today, those babies might face a world that borders on the uninhabitable. These are not hypothetical people. They are here right now. With luck and hard work, we can bequeath these new Oregonians a world where global warming is actually being reversed, or as Paul Hawken calls it, a drawdown. To get there, a recent paper in the journal Science offers a handy rule of thumb we can use. It's sort of like Moore's Law about semiconductors. Here's the rule. We need to cut our CO2 emissions in half every decade. So, some more dates. Between 2020 and 2030, we have to cut emissions in half. Then half again between 30 and 40, et cetera. So to bring this back to the June 1st resolution, I urge you to do 3 things. Number 1, stick to the goal date of 2030 for the clean, renewable electricity sector, not 2035. Other larger cities, such as San Diego, are doing it even sooner. Companies like Apple are moving faster. It isn't radical. We can do it. Electricity is about 30% of our carbon emissions, so we have to do this if we're going to meet that rule of thumb I talked about. Don't be seduced by dirty alternatives like nuclear, biomass, waste incineration, or any kind of fossil fuels. Keep a strict definition. This has to be a just transition. It's going to require big changes. Some of them are going to fall hardest on those who are already suffering the most. We can help with that if we partner with those communities. Finally, if you haven't already, please submit your comments to the PUC opposing PGE's plan to build new gas plants at Carty before the day after tomorrow, Friday, and join us in testifying in front of the PUC next Monday. New fossil fuel infrastructure is completely incompatible with the transition to clean energy. We, the people of Portland, ask you to do what is right and make a rapid and just transition to 100% clean and renewable energy. We're counting on you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Next item, please.
Item 457, request of Joe Walsh to address council regarding communication.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. I come not to praise you, I come to warn you. In the 3rd century, part of the Roman Empire collapsed, and we are repeating the same disaster. What does this have to do with Portland? Everything. Mayor, you came here into office thinking that you are the person to tame the ongoing protests that are taking place during the last and also your administration. So I come to warn you so you cannot say we did not know. Forget the fact that we have a Caligula in D.C. What you are doing with the Imperial Guard, or as we now call them, the police, is what we should look at. And you use the Guard to punish the houseless. You use the Guard to arrest those who dare to say no to your illegal orders. Often the DA and the courts have now thrown out the charges against those who you had arrested. You have met in private with those who would run this city as a city-state of Greece, or maybe in the Middle Ages in the House of Medici. Dictator by any other name is still a dictator. You care only for your own prosperity, and if that is in line with the people's needs, we will not suffer. But if there is a conflict, we will and are suffering. We ask you to resign your good offices for the sake of the city. All save Commissioner Udali have been given our petition under the state and federal constitution to resign your office. We will continue from time to time to update the signatures from your constituents as they grow in number. Your God has now resorted to giving out jaywalking tickets to cop watchers and protesters. I would like to thank you for that action. Because what you have done is you've taken people that just wanted justice and are making radicals out of them, and I thank you for that. More and more radicals means we may think about expanding the homeless, expanding the protest at your houses so your police can keep busy. We are in need of strong local government who will stand with us for sanctuaries and other things, and we do not have it now. Trumpy barbarians are at the gates. We ask you to go with our blessings, but go. And
Thank you.
don't thank me.
Next item, please.
Item 458, request of Merrick Bonneau to address council regarding settlement agreement arrest record.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm a concerned citizen who was brutalized by the police back in 1999.
I'm sorry, could I ask you to state your name just for the record?
Yeah, my name is Merrick Bonneau,
Thank you.
and that's not an alias.
Thank you, sir.
On April 13th, 2016, I was profiled and targeted by plainclothes Homeland Security and DEA agents at Amtrak. My Fourth Amendment rights were violated by the use of a police dog. Under the Fourth Amendment, probable cause must be established and a signed search warrant by a judge must be acquired before conducting any search. The use of police dogs to smell passengers and their belongings constitutes a search and is therefore a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I was arrested for not consenting to a search and taken to the federal building. I was interrogated for over 6 hours and was released without being booked and without paperwork. On April 14th, 2016, I got a copy of my arrest record. The records were not updated to show the previous day's arrest, but I was made painfully aware that the police had manipulated my arrest record and put multiple false charges on my arrest record. Also, the city had not followed through with the expunging of my arrest record as per settlement agreement. The settlement agreement that the city council forced through despite my informing the council that I was under duress at the time, and I wish to have them set aside this settlement agreement. Because the city council forced through the settlement agreement, they're required to follow through with all aspects of that settlement agreement. I have also not received a letter of regret from the city for my police brutality in '99 as per settlement agreement. The police manipulating my arrest record and putting false charges on my arrest record is a crime and constitutes police corruption. The city not following through with their settlement agreement constitutes negligence. On April 25th, 2016, I got another copy of my arrest record. My race had been changed from black to white, and the Amtrak arrest was labeled detained and released, not arrested. I believe this was done to cover up the illegality and severity of my arrest, as well as the unconstitutional use of police dogs to search Amtrak passengers. On April 13, 2003, my IAD complaint rose to City Council. During that hearing, Mayor Vera Katz read a false portion of deposition from one of my witnesses, Kay Huxford. I believe this was done in effort to exonerate the police of wrongdoing and to make me look dishonest. Falsifying my witness depositions is a crime and constitutes City Council and City Attorney collusion and corruption. The constitutional rights of the people are the foundation that our country is built on and must be upheld no matter what the cost. If they are not, what is the use of having the Constitution? What is the point of swearing to uphold and defend the Constitution if the public officials you ignore the Constitution, if as public officials you ignore the Constitution? In efforts to protect yourself and your fellow public servants from liability, the constitutional rights of the people are more important than somebody's job. The Fourth Amendment is in place to keep us safe from unreasonable search and seizure by agents of the government. For the record, we are all innocent until proven guilty. That right should always be in place, otherwise we are no longer living in a free country, we are in a tyranny. Here's the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describe the places to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. That was not done in my case and is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment rights.
Thank you, sir. Next item, please.
Item 459.
Sir, you forgot, there's an electronic device up here. It looks like a nice one. You don't want to leave that one. Thank you. And I'm sorry I'm not familiar with your case, but legal counsel is here, and I'll poke into it.
I gave every single one of you council members a packet of information,
Very
which
good.
included all this information, as well as the CD I had of me and Commissioner Saltzman. We had
Excellent.
an interview together, so you guys have
Okay,
all the
I've got
evidence.
that. Great,
yeah.
thank you. I appreciate that. Next item, I'm sorry, Carla.
Okay. 459, request of Robert McCullough to address council regarding Washington High School Southeast Community Center.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to see you today. Please do not quit. I believe I voted for each one of you, though I've not always agreed with each one of you. Mayor, sometimes the mayor provides another minute or so for a recognized civic organization like Southeast Uplift. As I listened to Dr. Pault, I hope I said that right, I was hoping you might grant me 1 minute to comment on her words.
Please.
Thank you. Dr. Pault said you'll be hearing from industry experts and representatives opposing the adoption of renewables. I am actually a bona fide expert on this issue. A report on that was provided throughout the region, published in, I think, 50 different papers and articles on the dramatic reduction in the cost of renewables. Over the last 5 years, the cost of renewables have gone down 50%. They're now cheaper than our nuclear plant. They're cheaper than large baseload units. There's nothing magic about it. This was simply technology. We've made enough of them. We've gotten good at it. They're cheap, they're safe, they're easy to install, and as Dr. Pault said, so much better than I did. We're going to be living here, and our children will be. So please give her words all the attention you can, because I think she's right.
Thank you, sir.
I'm now changing my hat to Southeast Uplift, and I'll be very brief.
Thank you.
Many years ago, Hugh Smith, senior partner over at Stoli Bowley, brilliant, wonderful lobbyist, mainly on the federal side, said, if you keep talking long enough, people will give in just to stop having to listen to you. As you know, we've been working on the Washington High School Southeast Community Center for many, many years, and we have absolutely nagged you to death. I apologize for this, but it's an important issue. Council Clerk, would you put up my one slide? So this is the community center we don't have. And I put it up simply to shame you a little bit. All of you have endorsed the concept at one point or another. I was not in any meetings with Commissioner Udally on it, but I presume this is the sort of thing you'd like to see for our city. Where I am on this is our last chance to talk to you before the time runs out on our first right of refusal on 1.3 acres that we would like to keep open. Earlier last week, I was in a boardroom high above Vancouver, British Columbia, with Shell executives and the head of an Indian group. Robert Dennis, the secretary of the Huayat tribe, looked at the executives and said, I don't like excuses. I thought actually about asking him to fly down and give this speech for me. We have a lot of excuses why we haven't moved forward. They're good excuses. Mayor, you explained you didn't have $10 million. I know that. I sit on the appropriate committees. But we've also been told lawsuits. We have answers to the lawsuits. Contract issues. We don't have to pay all the money up front. There are solutions to this. So one last time, I would beg you, consider calling the school district and saying, we have 200,000 neighbors who want to save this land. Will you negotiate with us? We have solutions. We have money, actually. And what we need is a chance. Now, I don't expect to win this argument, and I will respect you no less if I lose. But I do warn you that I'm very boring, and you have to put up with me for years to come, because we need this place for our kids, for our older folks, for our families, and we don't have it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Why don't we go to the consent agenda? Have there been any items pulled off of the consent agenda?
Consent agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
item 464 is being pulled.
Yeah, 464 is actually
Okay.
being returned to the mayor's office, so please call the roll on the remainder.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Udaley. Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please.
Item 460, accept the street tree inventory report.
Commissioner Fritz?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really happy to introduce this item. And it's a spectacular collaboration between the Portland Parks and Recreation's Urban Forestry Division and volunteers all over the city. Portland Parks and Recreation's Urban Forestry Department has completed one of the largest inventory of street trees, city trees in the United States to guide management of Portland's urban forest. Street trees are a crucial public asset that provide health and economic benefits to our community. And today we'll hear about the inventory findings from the Urban Forestry staff and the Urban Forestry Commission's Policy Committee. So I'm delighted to introduce Jen Cairo, the City Forester.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Jen Cairo, City Forester and Manager of Urban Forestry, which is a division of Parks and Recreation. And with me today for this presentation are Angie DeSalvo, Urban Forestry Outreach and Science Supervisor and founder and manager of the Volunteer Street Tree Inventory. Also, there aren't enough chairs, but Mark Bello is somewhere here. He is the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission and also served on the Title 11 Implementation Oversight Advisory Committee. Jim Labby will be presenting. He is a 2016 recipient of the Bill Nato Community Trees Award. He's also been on the Title 11 Implementation Advisory Oversight Committee and is currently working with the Policy Committee of the Urban Forestry Commission. And lastly, Dr. Vivek Chandas, Director of the Sustaining Urban Places Research Lab at Portland State University, and also a member of the Urban Forestry Commission. Our presentation today has two parts. Angie and I will fill you in on the street tree inventory and put it within a context, especially for Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Udaley, before whom we have not spoken before.
Thank you.
And the second part will be our commission partners speaking to the future of street trees in the city. Please ask any questions whenever you will. Urban Forestry's mission statement is to preserve and ensure the urban forest and the services it provides for current and future generations of Portland residents. Our work includes the physical, full life cycle tree work of tree planting, young and mature tree care, tree removal when necessary, and then planting again in various ways. We also respond to tree hazards and emergencies in city rights-of-way and city properties 24/7 in all weather. We monitor and assess the forest and forest services, develop and implement tree policies and programs such as the city's Urban Forest Management Plan. We implement city tree regulations through outreach, permitting, and enforcement, and we also foster local community tree knowledge and stewardship. Finally, we work with residents and partners collaboratively to support Portland's trees, including the Urban Forestry Commission, which is 11 residents who volunteer their time and energy to support and advise decision makers on all things trees in the city. Next. In arboriculture, we have a saying, trees are the answer. And for many things important to everyone, not just urban foresters, that statement is absolutely true. Research has repeatedly shown that trees are needed in cities for many reasons, and I'm going to just focus on two right now for the sake of time. The first of those is that they improve public health in important ways, including providing cleaner air, taking up carbon dioxide and particulates from the air, and off-gassing essential oxygen. They reduce levels of heat-related illness and human mortality from heat. They increase babies' birth weights and reduce the amount of time people spend recovering from illness in hospitals or being out of work. The second service of trees that's essential in cities that I'll stress today is that they are a key climate resilience tool for urban areas. They reduce summer heat in homes and in streets, and the loss of trees correlates closely with higher temperatures in summer and urban heat island effect. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration promotes urban forests as green infrastructure to fight the effects of climate change. Chicago speaks of, quote, fortifying the urban forest as a strategy to counter climate change. And of course, trees play a prominent role in Portland's own climate action plan. I want to note that these issues often disproportionately affect people of color, the less affluent, and underserved communities in cities, including Portland. These residents increasingly need these and other tree services. Our urban forest is essential infrastructure, no less important than the streets, power lines, water pipes, sewer systems, bridges, and the like. Or another way to look at it is, what would Portland be without its trees? So Angie will now speak to one component of the city's urban forest, street trees.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Angie DeSalvo. I'm with Urban Forestry, and I'm so pleased to be here today to bring you the results from our street tree inventory completed last year. Just to clarify, today I'm talking about trees in the public right-of-way. Our urban forest has many components, our private trees, our park trees, but here we're talking about right-of-way trees, those trees that line our streets, the first to greet you when you walk out your home. They buffer our transportation corridors, and they're also the primary way that our residents in the city interact with nature. And we went about inventorying these trees with a large group of volunteers, and I want to first emphasize that the maintenance of these trees is done by the adjacent property owner, so keep that in mind as we go forward with this. In Portland, we have a long history of urban forest management, and our very first inventory was conducted in 1938 by the Works Progress Administration. And then again in 1976 by the Parks Department, and most recently we completed our largest effort to date last year, and the city has grown quite a bit since those first two inventories. And we need reliable data about what's happening with our street trees so that we can adequately manage and maintain that very important resource. And so this data is driving our management. Now, I mentioned that street trees are maintained by the adjacent property owner. So in Portland, of course, we have to involve our residents in collecting this data. So we could have gone out and just collected the information, but instead we opted to partner with our communities. And so we set about neighborhood by neighborhood, talking to people, asking them to come with us on this journey to learn their trees, help us to map and measure, collect data, and do this together. And over 6 years, we collected information on 220,000 street trees in all 95 neighborhoods. 1,300 people assisted us, and most of these had never volunteered with parks before. This was their first opportunity and interaction to work with urban forestry or the city. And together they gave 17,000 hours. And that's the equivalent of one person out there walking the street every day for about 8.5 years. So we're incredibly proud of the community coming together to assist us with this project. Now, anytime you use volunteers, when you are collecting data, you have to design your project carefully. And we made sure to collect enough information, but to allow it to be accurate enough so that we could teach people to ID and collect information. And so we collected information on what type of trees, the species, their size or diameter at breast height. Here you see two folks out measuring the size of this nice street tree. We gave them a condition rating, good, fair, poor, or dead. We mapped their location, and we also collected information on the site. Now, we had an excellent accuracy rate, 95%. We were just cited in urban forestry and urban greening as one of the highest for volunteer inventories, and I really give a lot of credit to our professional arborist community. At the hundreds of work days that we held, we had 2 volunteer arborists, usually on bikes, writing about making sure that our volunteers were collecting accurate information. And so without their assistance, I'm sure our accuracy rate would have dropped. But together as a team, we collected great information.
Commissioner
Let me
Fritz.
interrupt for a second, because when I saw that image when they were previewing this, I said, oh, so then you have to, they're measuring the circumference, so then you have to go home and, do the whole 2 pi r or whatever it is. And in fact, the wonders of modern science, they have double-sided tape measures, one of which is the actual inches, and the other converts it to diameter by doing the circumference, which, what a nice thing.
Yep, 2 measurements, 1 tape. You got it. And I will stress that the way that we designed this project, we had 2 goals. One was to go out and collect great information to get this data, but the second was to create an education project, to outreach, and to really work with people to get out in their communities. Both of those goals are mandated to us through our urban forest management plan. So we accomplished both. This is a map of where we worked. Each of those green dots is a tree. You will notice that we have more trees towards the center of the city. On the west side, you see a bit fewer, but that's because this particular protocol is not geared towards natural wooded areas. And so most of our street trees are located in that central area of the city. And as you move east, you see that they become fewer and farther apart. Some highlights from our key findings. Looking at that map, you'll see that our trees are not equitably distributed. I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment, but they're not located evenly throughout the city. However, we have abundant opportunities for planting. Over 90,000 sites are open and available, ready for trees right now. We're overly reliant on just a handful of tree types. Maples, acer, 27% of our street trees are maples. Plums and cherries in the Prunus genus are also highly overrepresented. This leaves few very large, native, and evergreen trees, those trees that are very important for providing services. Those are few and far between. And many of our trees are young. We've had some very successful planting efforts, but they are not necessarily growing and reaching those larger size classes. So I'll highlight a handful of those. So let's talk about distribution. This is a map of the city that shows where trees are occupying available sites. So the darker green colors, over 70% of the sites in those neighborhoods have street trees. As you move further east, we see a lower stocking level. So in some neighborhoods, less than 35% of the available sites actually have trees in them. And this is a big concern, especially in East Portland, where many of our lower income communities are, our communities of color. They don't have access to those same street trees. So keep this in mind. This is an issue that we're tackling. We also need to have more diversity in the palette of trees that are growing so that we are more resilient to pests and pathogens and a changing climate. So this is a map of the Hollywood neighborhood, and just as an illustration, we put trees that are vulnerable to 4 key pests and pathogens in red and those that are resistant in green. And we chose 2 pests and pathogens that are here, Dutch elm disease and bronze birch borer, and 2 that we think will be coming soon, emerald ash borer and Asian longhorn beetle. Imagine if Hollywood lost all of those vulnerable trees at the same time. That would be catastrophic for that neighborhood. And the best way to deal with this is to plant a diverse palette. We have very few of our largest trees. So this wonderful big leaf maple, a native tree here on the left, much larger than 18 inches in diameter. But when you look at 18 inches as a cutoff, only 15% of our street tree population is of that size. And trees, when they're larger, that's when they are providing most of their benefits. 42% of our street trees are small. They're less than 6 inches in diameter. They're newly planted, they're young, or they're small form trees. And a little bit of maintenance for these young trees, making sure that they are mulched and watered and structurally pruned when they're young, will go a long way in keeping that investment going, ensuring that they're healthy, and getting them to those larger size classes. Okay, so those are a couple highlights of the info, but what are we doing with this information? So anytime you run a citizen science project, your participants are not going to let you wait until the project is over. They're not going to wait 6 years for us to wrap up all of the data and then make some changes. But we had enough great information early in the project to make significant changes in our management and policy. As an example, we've updated our approved tree list. We've added in those large form, evergreen, native trees to give more diversity. We've also added planting targets for our large permit holders. So for example, Bureau of Environmental Services has been planting more large form evergreen and natives, and we've also set targets for planting in low income and low canopy neighborhoods. So we've seen great improvements there. And we're trying to tackle this issue of equitable distribution. So we've contracted with Portland State University to help us develop a citywide planting strategy so that we can really get into and understand how to better serve all Portlanders and to really bring trees where they're needed without adding undue burden, especially with that financial piece, because you plant a street tree, the adjacent property owner is the one maintaining it. So that's how we've used data and policy. All of our data is available online. There's a map, it's open data, it's being used by research institutions, by residents, by universities, other bureaus. It's all available. One of the best parts of the project has been that our volunteers have stayed with us. And so this map in green shows you where we have active tree teams. So all of these groups that conducted the inventory, they're still coming back to work in their communities. And they're planting, they're pruning, they're talking to their neighbors, they're doing great work out there. As an example, on the lower right, this is the Albina neighborhood tree team near the Mississippi District. And this is their second year removing and replacing dead and dying cherry trees for low-income residents. So they received a grant, and they were able to replace 40 trees this year, all done by volunteers. I'm very proud of their work. And I mentioned the need to maintain young trees, and we are tackling this with our partners. Urban Forestry does workshops where we work with volunteers to prune young trees. We have a community tree care program in partnership with Friends of Trees and some funding from Bureau of Environmental Services. And together we're pruning about 2,000 young trees a year. Although that's a drop in the bucket when you look at, say, the 90,000 trees that are in those smaller size classes. But we found a good place to start with the resources that we have. So in closing, I'd just like to say thank you to all of our volunteers and our communities who really did this work for us. People came out to help their community, to improve their urban forests, to meet their neighbors, to do something positive right where they live, and they've really, truly made a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, I just want to mention that Angie started this program just starting with one neighborhood and has been able to expand it across the city, and we're very proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Daly.
Could you elaborate at all on the policy solutions for addressing the issue of affordability for low-income and fixed-income homeowners? You kind of touched on that. I just see that as that's obviously a driving factor behind why we don't have more trees as we move further out, and we have thousands of low-income homeowners who may not be able to afford to maintain, remove, repair their sidewalk, and then if they have to, they really don't want to replace that tree and do it all over again.
It's a big issue, yes. In terms of city code, that responsibility is assigned to the adjacent property owner, and we do have limited resources to deal with that directly. And I think the folks that are going to speak next are going to address that directly. And so with the limited resource that we have, we're trying to work around some of that, but without the funding or direct resource, there's not much that we can offer.
Very well said, Angie. And I'll just add to that, Commissioner Udili, we know for a fact that the adjacent property owner having to maintain the street tree is an obstacle to tree planting for understandable reasons. And I know Friends of Trees and BES in their street tree planting program have run into that. So at this point, we'll turn it over to the Urban Forestry Commission members who will speak to you about the future of street trees.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mark Bello. I'm chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. Mara Reddish is our chair of our policy committee, and Jim Labby and Vivek Chandras will be joining us to make this very brief presentation. First of all, thank you very much, and thank you for putting resources into our urban forest. On a personal note, while these folks come up here, I'll let you know that I've been a city planner for the city of Portland since 1976. I was liaison to the Forestry Commission in the 80s, and where we were and where we've become is an amazing journey, and we should be proud of ourselves. I just want to say that. I am very proud of us. So, having said that, I've been very pleased as chair to participate and see the Forestry Commission create a policy committee that has taken on a topic that has bedeviled us for a century, literally. Unlike Pasadena, California, which addressed this issue in 1898, we are still struggling with this issue. And that issue is, what do we do about trees in the right-of-way? I want to point out that both the PowerPoint presentation and this two-pager talks about problems and solutions, but all of the items on the second page are not tasks for the City Council, but actually result from the incredible knowledge that our members have as they start working through this in collaboration with Friends of Trees Verde, Johnson Creek Watershed Council, Audubon, and many other organizations. So we've given this a lot of thought, and we realize now's the time for us to have a inter-bureau conversation, and it's the City Council that can put that into motion. Finally, I want to say that we always invite anyone to attend our Forestry Commission meetings. They're Thursday morning. I know you're very busy, but come anytime, or any issue that anyone on the council would like the Forestry Commission to address specifically, we are more than open, working with our Commissioner Fritz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Mayor Wheeler, City Council. My name is Jim Labby. I'm going to present a proposal today. I don't want to repeat, but we're here today, of course, because street and public right-of-way trees are a valuable public asset, and Portlanders care a lot about them. I've lived and worked in all parts of the city, and I've experienced this over my career. Trees are uniquely situated. Street trees are particularly important because they're uniquely situated in the landscape along our transportation corridors to mitigate the environmental impacts, mostly from cars and driving, and also provide, they're really critical to helping create the vibrant, walkable more compact neighborhoods that are really core to our city comp plan and the regional plans. And these benefits are only going to grow as our city grows more dense. This is recognized in a variety of plans, recent plans, the comp plan, the climate strategy plan, going back to the watershed management plan. These are, all these plans and more recognize the need for trees and other green infrastructure throughout the city, but especially along our Portland's densest corridors and in our dense centers. They also call for an equitable distribution of trees across the city, and as Vivek is going to mention, our urban heat island impacts our most vulnerable populations along these key transport corridors and in these tree-deficient neighborhoods. And I always like to point out that we're farthest behind in meeting our tree canopy goals in the public right-of-way, and in our industrial lands. So what is the problem? There's really two problems. You've already heard about the street tree maintenance issue and the consequences of that. In addition to the equity issues that raises, there's a backlog of trees in poor condition, and this tree damage is a public safety issue. It also increases the damage during storm events like we recently had, and that's a burden both to residents but also to the bureaus. There's an extra cost, particularly to PBOT, in terms of dealing with storm impacts. But there are other issues. We can't use capital funds for street trees if we're not maintaining them in most cases. The other big problem is we are needlessly losing large, healthy trees and street tree planting sites in the process of making street improvements and in development situations. And there's a lot of case studies of this. I wish I could go into them here today. But basically, it comes down to the fact that there's a lot of competition for space in the public right-of-way, and trees are really at the end of the line in consideration. And that's not it's because there's bad people in the city that don't like trees. It's because we have outdated policies, procedures, and code requirements that really force the unnecessary removal of trees and the removal of tree planting spaces. So looking at this issue and updating our codes and policies is really critical. And this also is an equity issue. Where you see some of the innovative things happening with street trees, and there are out there, it's in neighborhoods where the neighbors are loud and vocal. And they compel the city to do these innovative things. In the parts of the city, like East Portland, where you don't have that capacity, that's where you really see trees taking a hit, and we're losing a lot of these large, healthy trees. So there's an equity issue on this side of the problem as well. So why now? Why address street trees now? Really three main reasons. First of all, we've just made this huge investment in inventorying this asset that we're not maintaining, the street trees. We have countless numbers of people involved out in their community thinking about this. Now is a good time for a big look at street trees and addressing some of these problems. Over the last few years, we've also started making investments in planting street trees ever since the watershed plan. And we've made some progress, but if we don't maintain these young trees, they're not going to grow into large, healthy trees, especially in our under-treed neighborhoods. And we're going to have more of the costs that we mentioned earlier. There is one city and Friends of Tree pruning workshops, a volunteer street tree maintenance thing, but it's not going to cut the mustard when you talk about over 200,000 street trees across the city. The other thing, looking at street trees and public right of trees right now is really timely, given a number of ongoing and current planning efforts, including the citywide street tree strategy that PSU and Urban Forestry are working on, the Urban Forestry Plan update, future Title 11 code updates. We know there's more to do related to reforming Title 11 and updating it. But there's also a lot, as we update the zoning code and implement the comp plan, there's a lot of problems that are outside Title 11 that impact trees. A lot of barriers to preserving and planting street trees, as I mentioned. PBOT has a number of projects that they're working on right now which align nicely with this, the Living Streets program, the update of the city's right-of-way management manual, and then you have these community efforts like the Jade District Greening Project on the community level that are focused on street trees. Lastly, the other third most important reason why now is an investment in street trees is really investment in local jobs and green development, and I know that's a high priority right now of the city. We have a real chance to build on existing programs. Verity has this really cool program with the city where they employ low-income people to plant and establish street trees in low-income neighborhoods. A street tree maintenance program, a targeted street tree maintenance program, could build on a program like that and expand it to deal with the maintenance issues. I'm going to skip ahead here and just say, so our proposal, the gist of it, is really to convene a collaborative process that we ultimately think needs to be a task force, interbureau task force with community stakeholders, to assess the problems of maintaining and stewarding street trees, investigating public finance to begin the city taking a more active role in that, and addressing and updating the codes and processes related to right-of-way improvements and development to better integrate street trees into our streetscapes. We know this is going to need key bureaus involved and stakeholders. It's going to need some facilitation and technical services to, for example, look at what other cities are doing. What are the financing options for street tree maintenance? What are the code changes that happen to do a street tree maintenance program? And we're not going to do this all at once. I think we're not going to adopt a street tree maintenance program next year even, but we can begin to start developing one in a targeted way. So I think as a first step, our ask today is really that the City Council convene a work session, maybe this summer after the bureaus are reassigned, after the budget process is farther along, that can look at this issue more clearly. We need you to direct your key staff, of your staff, to be involved and in the bureaus. And our hope is that if we had a work session this summer, we could kind of delve into these issues and hopefully initiate a project in September. And with that, I'm going to pass to Vivek, who's going to close out. Thank you.
Just, if I might interrupt for a second, I'm mindful, colleagues, that we asked for 30 minutes for this presentation and we're now over. This proposal and request for a work session came out of the Urban Forestry Commission and our community partners. So I appreciate the fact that you're here, and if you could keep going on explaining what you are asking.
Okay, very briefly, I understand we're over. My name is Vivek Chandas. I'm a professor of urban studies and planning at Portland State University. Mayor Wheeler, city commissioners, just 3 quick points. One is that we are very lucky. Our lab has been conducting research on the trees of Portland, taking from machines that fly up in the air, taking pictures of the ground, as well as now this robust street tree inventory that we have. And we're bringing those two things together to really come up with a story that we are quite lucky that there were a number of people, city staff, leaders, as well as community members, that planted trees early on, decades ago, and we're now reaping the benefits of it. We've seen, in fact, as Jim was bringing up, number of reductions in urban heat. We've seen upwards of 13 degrees of reduction in urban heat from one neighborhood to another, and in some cases, especially with low-income neighborhoods, that could be a matter of life and death, as we've seen in Chicago, Missouri, France, all over the planet. And with a changing with changing temperatures across the globe, we're going to see these impacts most acute in cities. Second, we're also just learning about a number of these feedbacks that we would have not necessarily foreseen even just 1 decade ago. For example, we have just found out the relationship between urban heat, tree canopy, and the amount of money individuals pay for their energy bills. We've been able to document that trees are one of the single most important factors in the built environment in terms of the amount of money people are contributing to their energy costs, particularly during summer when a lot of air conditioning is used, and as the planet warms, we're going to be seeing those impacts on communities' pocketbooks. And last, I just want to quickly reiterate that this Interbureau Task Force proposal, from my point of view, and again, being outside of the city, has been illuminating for me, in part because I've gotten to understand how different bureaus work. And much like our disciplines in the university, which I have been vehemently trying to get us to work together across disciplines, I'm eager to see an intra-bureau communication process play out. I think it'll do 3 things. I think, first off, it'll improve collaboration across the bureaus. Second, I think it'll improve communication across the complexities of how we actually implement Title 11, which I've recently come to understand in a lot more detail. And I think it'll also just fundamentally make Portland a much more livable place, especially in these times of a climate crisis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Public testimony?
Yes, we have 8 people signed up. The first 3, please come on up, are Doug Klotz, Barbara Wharton, and Brian Simas.
So I hate to do this. I don't like shortening public testimony, but given that we are way off the schedule and we have 3 time certains today, could I ask everybody to try and wrap their testimony up in 2 minutes each? Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Doug Klotz. I'm
Morning.
a longtime advocate for pedestrians and the urban environment. I support the street tree asset management strategy. Trees in the right-of-way, as Jim Levy noted, are increasingly an important place to plant trees, especially with the increasing density and lot coverage that we'll be getting on centers and corridors, as well as downtown in the Pearl District. And we need that growth. We need the housing on the corridors where you can ride transit and not be polluting with your auto driving. So we need the trees there, and we need them in the right-of-way. We need better coordination among the many uses of the right-of-way. We have electrical vaults, water meters. There are a lot of buildings going in right now in the Pearl District and in downtown where you'll have 100 foot of frontage here, 100 foot there. You get 1 tree, where the code would call for 10 trees there. Because, well, there's this fault and there's that fault. There's all these specs for how far things have to be apart. We need to look at all those specs, see if some of those can be changed. Can we have, shorter street lights so you don't have to keep the trees so far away from them? So you can shine under the trees. And we especially need to work on getting trees at intersections. I mean, that's where the heat islands really are. And then there's all these obstacles to getting trees that actually shade an intersection. And that will mean working in concert with traffic engineers. Of course, I've been working in concert with or against traffic engineers for the last 25 years. But yes, the traffic engineers are critical in this fight. I also want to note that the city is right now planting trees in those underserved areas in East Portland, which are also underserved as far as having no sidewalks or other pedestrian facilities. And some of the trees are going in right where the sidewalk would be. And the city has acknowledged that, well, yes, the trees would have to come out if there were a sidewalk to go in. And that doesn't seem like the right way to do it. Like, we need to determine where the trees can go that will not interfere with a future sidewalk. But I think that these trees are a very important aspect of the city that we need to make sure that we're getting as many and as large the ones as we can.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Wharton. I'm a resident of Concordia neighborhood. I've been a volunteer with Urban Forestry as a street tree steward for the past 8 years, and I'm also a member of the Concordia Tree Team, which was the first neighborhood that embarked on the inventory for street trees. I've seen in the past 8 years so many improvements as it relates to urban forestry here in Portland, but I continue to see so many opportunities that we haven't yet seized. I walk through my neighborhood, and just as a resident, there's a lot of development in Concordia, and I see houses coming down, houses going up, and at the very point where street trees are planted, I see the wrong tree being planted. So we're not seizing that opportunity for future. So I think that as far as homeowners for street tree planting, developers are actually the most important homeowner in the city, and we haven't connected with them successfully yet. The other thing I see is with the data from the street tree inventory is those underserved neighborhoods that need trees as well. And now we have this data, and it seems like the most perfect time to start addressing and letting that data direct future efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
I'm Brian Symes, and I'm a retired architect from the Housing Authority of Portland. And I am the first volunteer for the Friends of Trees.
Wow.
In 1989, I was at 7:30 in the morning in the basement of this building. I was a witness of Richard Seidman asking Bob Nato for $5,000 to start the Friends of Trees. And that is the earthquake that created the tsunami that we have seen here today. Good volunteers are the best thing in this city. And when they get involved with the Friends of Trees and making our city better, it's like buying a 5-penny acorn and ending up with a $10,000 worth tree. So I encourage this city council to, go on with this inventory, involve citizens in their trees. And as an architect, that still applies for hundreds of permits in the city. When I have a client that knows the tree code, that knows their trees on the property, it makes my job and all the BDS people down there at Southwest 1900, it makes their job so much easier. All the zoning people that I see, all the PBOT people, all the BES people that I see every time I apply for a permit, it makes it a wonderful city that everybody knows what the worth of trees are, and you guys are responsible for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's a great story. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Next three, please.
Are Daniel Newberry, Elizabeth Hildebrand, and Scott Fogarty.
Good morning.
My name is Daniel Newberry, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you. I'm a member of the Urban Forestry Commission and Executive Director of Johnson Creek Watershed Council, and we're very proud to have been part of the street and tree inventory for the past couple of years. I think everybody's kind of on board with knowing what the benefits of trees are, especially the health benefits. But the trees are really in a lot of ways, what makes Portland, Portland. It makes it livable, and we've got a lot of development pressure coming up, and it seems to me as if whenever there's any new kind of development that involves the right-of-way, street trees are often the first casualty. And I think it's important to point out, although I think it's obvious to everybody, that when a large street tree comes down, it really takes decades for a new tree to come up and grow in its place and really reap those benefits. So I think it's really important that this proposal that we're putting forward today to have all the city departments coordinate, I think it's really important because we need to really prevent those big street trees from coming down if there's a way to do that. And I think that getting the departments together is the way to do it. The city bureaus are really good at completing their missions, but so many times, in any big bureaucracy, everybody gets kind of siloed, and in a lot of ways, street trees end up being the sort of casualty that fall between the cracks. Earlier today, Commissioner Udaley, you had asked about the whole equity issue with street trees, and I think just based on some research I've done, that there are some good examples in other large cities around the country. We're not the first city to have to deal with issues of equity when it comes to paying for street tree maintenance. There are some other cities, Washington, D.C. and San Francisco come to mind as some really good examples of how this has been dealt with. I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. My name is Scott Fogarty. I'm Executive Director with Friends of Trees. And I just want to first acknowledge Portland Parks and Recreation and the Urban Forestry team for doing this inventory, and for Bureau of Environmental Services for investing in our urban forest. This is a great asset to the city. At Friends of Trees, we to address Commissioner Udaley, we take pride in the fact that we are trying to increase the urban canopy in the marginalized neighborhoods. We have our Greening the East Side program where we specifically focus on outer East Side Portland for the majority of our tree planting events. And I can only say that we are thrilled that there is hopefully going to be inter-bureau a team that, where we can come together with stakeholders and really address the issue of the maintenance of our trees over the long term. Daniel mentioned other cities outside of this state, but other cities within the state, notably Eugene, for example, are responsible, the city is responsible for trees from planting to maintenance events when we have big issues like this winter, when you have big trees coming down and causing property damage and even death to humans. So we very much encourage the city council to form this task force, and I know it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a little time. We hope we're at the table for that discussion because we do have a connection to the community very directly, and we really appreciate the fact that bureaus will be working with each other and organizations like ours and Johnson Creek Watershed Council to come up with a solution to this problem, this ever-growing problem, no pun intended, of trees that need maintenance over time. So thank you very much for your time and for consideration of this task force.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Elizabeth Hildebrand. I'm a resident in Northeast Portland, and I am a member of the Concordia Tree Team, as well as being a graduate from the 2012 Tree Stewardship Program. And when I first heard of this task force, the first thing that came to my mind was a character from a Dr. Seuss story, and I'm not sure exactly who it was, but what was, who speaks for the trees?
The Lorax.
Was it the Lorax? Okay. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this needs to start kicking in now. I grew up in Detroit, and I watched the urban canopy get destroyed by Dutch elm disease. It went from being a beautiful, leafy city to almost the decimation, which remains the same now today because of lack of planning. So right now in Portland, there's so much growth that's happening, and buildings are going up, trees are going down, that it is the perfect time for people to focus on the trees in the city, and fortunately, hopefully, can find the energy and focus that's needed to keep moving forward with this, the great tree canopy that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the last two who signed up are Mary Vogel and Michael Duro.
Hey, guys.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning. Michael, do you want to start?
Go ahead, Mary.
Hi. Go ahead.
No, you first.
Okay, I'm Mary Vogel, and Oregon Walks has already submitted our written testimony, so I won't repeat what's in that. But in any case, I did want to say about myself, I also participated in the inventory for downtown, and I've been testifying to the Planning and Sustainability Committee, Commission rather, for at least the last 4 years on the Central City 2035 plan and the West Quadrant plan about the need for better street trees downtown. I want to remind you that Jeff Speck's Walkable City subtitle is How Downtown Can Help Save America One Step at a Time. We do need to start with our downtown and expand out as well, downtown and Old Town. In the PSU study, we're also in the low street tree, low income neighborhoods survey. So I guess I want to request that they not be left out of the target, though I strongly support also targeting the East Side neighborhoods who are in a similar position. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I need to say. In addition to, I urge you to read our testimony. Also, that we, or as Oregon Walks, are very interested in participating on an advisory committee on this this topic of the street tree right of way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing, Ted? Hey, my name is Michael Drow. I'd say I'm a little relaxed. I'm here to speak for the trees, but I just think that's already been done. Anyway, I'm here to speak for the trees and the data. We need to pay attention to in our planning, and it would be really important to include the trees, the bees, and the invertebrates in our planning data, because there are places in China right now, entire provinces, where there are no trees and there are no bees. And we don't want to be that place, or we don't want to. So I don't need to really go into the details of that, but that speaks to where we're going. We need as much information as we can gather on the trees, both the trees on people's properties, the trees on private property, public property, and on rights of ways. To wit, I suggest you guys look into Google and look into big data and Hadoop. Hadoop and HBase is a good solution for this, and it's not an expensive solution. And you can actually get individual people, citizens, to populate the data along with the data you already have. I don't want to take too much of your time. I know you're busy, but thank you for your time. Have a nice day. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. As you know, the data is important, and I like your idea. It dovetails with a conversation we had about open data last week, and so it's actually a good dovetail to that conversation as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you both for your testimony. Commissioners, any further discussion before we entertain a motion?
Yeah, I have a question of the sponsor.
Yes.
Commissioner Fritz, this is on, right?
I turned it on.
Oh, thank you. It's a little confidence she has in me, for good reason. So Merrill Reddish gave us a briefing on this issue at the time that I was also the commissioner in charge. Mayor, you are now the commissioner in charge.
I'm sorry, Michael and Mary, you guys you go back to your seats. You don't have
Oh,
to
sorry.
sit there.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
apologize. Thank you.
So technically, now the mayor is the commissioner in charge of all the bureaus. And just speaking for the Bureau of Environmental Services, we were very impressed with the presentation, and we were eager to join some kind of inter-bureau task force. And we also thought the suggestion that there be a work session to scope it out and to have everyone at the table was a good idea. And so, Commissioner Fritz, as part of accepting this report, I know they're unrelated, but I would like to see if we can get a consensus to have that work session and have you make some kind of a motion in connection with accepting the report.
Yes, thank you. I mean, each one of us has a bureau, at least one, or did until a couple of weeks ago, have bureaus that are involved in this issue. And as my colleagues will remember, the Urban Forestry Department and the Bureau of Development Services have identified about 45 different high-profile challenges in Title 11. And collectively as council, we didn't have the resources of time and money to do that whole fix. So I would hope that each one of us, and Mayor, as you are now in charge of all the bureaus, you can direct the bureau directors to do this, and I would very much appreciate it if you would.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to accept the report.
Commissioner Daly, did you have something to say first? No, okay, very good. Sorry.
Move to accept the report.
Second.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Fritz, a second from Commissioner Fish. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish?
So that was an outstanding presentation. Thank you to the Urban Forestry Commission, the Urban Forester, all the folks who took time to testify. I'm a former Portland Parks and Rec Commissioner in charge, and now have the honor of being in charge of BES. And that means I've had some role in what we call the big three here, because if you add PBOT, those are the three infrastructure bureaus that probably have the most immediate impact over trees. I know Merrill Reddish couldn't be here today, and she's in a warm place, hopefully, with her family, but I do appreciate the briefing we got, and I think the vision is very compelling. And so, Mayor, I would urge that we schedule a work session in September and direct the relevant bureaus to participate. If I continue to have the honor of serving as the commissioner in charge of BES, we will fully participate. And I just wanted to share a couple of numbers to add to the outstanding presentation we had. So I asked my team for some context about trees and our work, since we are the city's environmental services utility. over the past 9 years, working with great partners like Friends of Trees and others, we've planted more than 45,000 trees, 30,000 of which were in the city's right-of-way. And each year, we plant about 2,700 new trees. Now, I noticed in one of your slides, you take a crack at quantifying the replacement value. We're treating it like infrastructure, so what's the value of our canopy? Well, here's a couple of numbers that we use. These are back of the envelope. If I was in court, I couldn't prove them, but I think they provide some context. Portland's street trees manage about 150 million gallons of stormwater every year. Now, think about that. If they didn't, we'd be talking about Big Pipe 2 or much more gray. So thank you, street trees, for managing about 150 million gallons of stormwater every year. And what's the savings just to our ratepayers, not our taxpayers over here in property taxpayers, but just our ratepayers? We estimate in excess of $4 million a year in avoided stormwater management costs. So next time you see a tree in the right-of-way, say thank you, because you're saving us money. We agree that more trees and healthier, better maintained trees in the right-of-way will help us meet the city's sustainable stormwater management and watershed health goals. And we also agree that unless we have a collaborative process to look at the equity issues, we're just not going to move the needle as we should in East Portland. So we look forward to fully participating in a future process. And Commissioner Fritz, who's been really the champion moving this thing forward, thank you for your leadership, and I'm proud to support the report. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank Urban Forestry for putting together this, and the many volunteers who helped do the street inventory report. I guess the one takeaway, I'm always searching for interesting trivia. Correct me afterwards if I'm wrong, but the takeaway is we have 220,000 street trees right now, and we have room for 93,000 more. So that's great. And I appreciate the work that's gone on, and I'm fully supportive of forming a task force to see if we can figure something out better to maintain our street trees. Aye.
Udaly.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to all the volunteers for their service to our community. I am looking forward to further conversations on the issues you've raised today and support the idea of a work session. Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, especially our volunteers and our staff, and for the succinct report that especially our Urban Forestry Commission and others gave us. We're actually only about 15 minutes over the time, and it's interesting that this suggestion from the community is the one that I believe I have universal support for. So, Mayor, I would like you to direct all the bureaus to cooperate with this. I'd like to see a work session in June or the beginning of July just to scope it out so that we can then be prepared in September. We all received multiple emails after we had what we thought was a relatively simple clarification that adjacent property owners are indeed responsible for their trees. We all experienced a lot of concern about that from our community during the recap process, the code updates. So we pulled that piece back. It's definitely something that's really important. And no matter who looks after these street trees, someone has to pay for the maintenance, for the removal if they fail. So it's really urgent that we figure out what's the most equitable way to manage our wonderful street tree inventories. So I do thank the Urban Forestry Commission and the Policy Committee, Angie DeSalvo, who, as I said, started this whole thing off in Concordia, and now it's citywide in all 95 neighborhoods, Brian Lando and Jen Cairo. The 1,300 volunteers who helped with this amazing inventory. We're so proud of it. And I've noticed Roberta Jortner, who's like Mark Bello, a retiree from the city of Portland, still volunteering her time and guiding this process, and she was very instrumental in getting the Title 11 passed. And so I'm just proud to work with people who, whether they're getting paid or not, are very willing to come together to make our city better. And I've often said that Friends of Trees is about more than just planting trees, and I really enjoyed the lunch yesterday to celebrate and wish that Scott had more time to tell us about the numbers of thousands and thousands and thousands of trees that have been planted. And it's not only going back to the trees that you helped plant with a team of people that at the beginning you didn't know who they were, and at the end of the morning you're fast friends. It's about that developing of friendship and that developing of community, that we're all in this together and we're going to help each other out. Because the size of trees that Friends of Trees plants, you could not do it with a single person unless you had some kind of mechanical device. So it's really a wonderful program. Also thanking Pooja Bhatt and my staff, our partners in the Bureau of Development Services, who have been doing their level best to try to figure out in development situations, how do we look after the trees? And so we do. We speak for the trees, which everyone needs. Aye.
Wheeler. Wheeler.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz, for your passion, your enthusiasm, and your leadership on this. I think this was a great presentation, and I want to thank the staff and the community volunteers who came in today. It was very positive. There were a number of things that I heard colleagues during the presentation. First of all, I'm hearing loudly and clearly that we would like to have a work session focused on this, so I will work with staff and work with the council clerk, and we'll secure a date that makes sense sometime between now and September, and we'll try to find the mutually agreed upon date that allows us to do that. I was concerned about the low income disparity that we're seeing, particularly in East Portland, and I'd like that to be a part of that conversation as we have it. I feel that we can do better to address it. Somebody made the great point that we can do more to connect directly with homeowners. And I've got a couple of ideas that I'd also like to perhaps vet at that work session on how we might go about that. I heard loudly and clearly, and it seems there's a consensus here amongst council to have an inter-bureau task force to work with some of our community partners to figure out how to best address these issues. With the agreement of my colleagues, why don't we wrap that into the conversation that we have as a work session, and maybe people in the community as well as all of us and our staffs could think about how best to orchestrate that for maximum benefit. And last but not least, I am really, I want to come back to the data collection and gathering issue that Michael raised during his public testimony. I think that's critical, and we really have an opportunity here to leverage the goodwill and the interest on the part of community in this effort to help us gather the data that's so hard for us to collect independently of a broad program. So all good ideas that came out of today's session, and I want to thank people for being here. I vote aye. The report is accepted. Thank you. Please call the next item, Carla.
Item 461, declare intent to initiate local improvement district formation proceedings to construct street, sidewalk, and stormwater improvements in the North Settle Road Local Improvement District.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. We have before us a longstanding issue and a potential solution with this proposal for initiating a local improvement district on North Settle Road.
I learned a lot.
The Portland Bureau of Transportation has been in discussion with property owners about a possible local improvement district here since early 2004, over 13 years ago. And let me start off by expressing PBOT's staff's appreciation to the cordial and collaborative conversations with property owners over those years. The many years of property owner concerns make it clear that there is unquestionably a need to improve this street. And you'll see in Andrew's presentation how dire the situation is out there. Doing nothing and kicking the can down the road is not in the best interests of the property owners and businesses that use Settle Road, North Settle Road. I also want to highlight that we recognize the estimated $8.5 million proposed cost of this local improvement district is a big ask. In fact, it's one, if not the most expensive local improvement districts we've ever considered initiating. But the need is great, so here we are. One final item to highlight before I turn it over to Andrew, as that the city will be contributing to this local improvement district through some of the newly enacted dollars from the heavy vehicle use tax, as well as from PBOT's system development charge funding. So we are all in this together, so to speak. Now I'll turn it over to our LID Administrator, Andrew Abbey.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Saltzman. Andrew Abbey, Local Improvement District Administrator. I know we're running over this morning, so I'll try to get through this presentation efficiently. So this is an overview map of North Settle Road at south of North Marine Drive. and it's west of North Portland Road, industrial area. This is the detail of the western end of the street. Subtle Road is the dead end. There are no plans to punch it through and to make it a connecting street. This is the eastern end of the street, closer to North Portland Road. Wanted to give a chronology of how we got here. So according to our records, the first building went up on Subtle Road in 1952. In 1978, this area was annexed from Multnomah County to the city. The county had much less stringent street improvement and stormwater requirement than the city. So we inherited that problem when we took that area over from Multnomah County. There was a jurisdictional transfer of many roads throughout the city and county that was done in 1984. Subtle Road was included in that. It's really a historical artifact that the city's even in the position of having maintenance responsibility for North Subtle Road. Where I got involved was in June 2003. That was when I got my first complaint about Subtle Road. Just to kind of put this into perspective, that was 2 years before my oldest child was born, and he is now 2/3 of the way through to getting to college. So this has been a really long conversation. 2004, we had another property owner meeting. Kind of went dark for quite a few years. At the end of 2015, I received a video, which I'll show you here momentarily. We had 2 meetings last year, and then we had another meeting earlier this year. We did petition this LID, and the main reason we're doing council-initiated LID is twofold. One is to get final resolution on whether or not we're going to improve the street. But also, there's the urgency to using the Fix Our Streets funding, the heavy vehicle funding. We made a commitment to the voters that we would deliver on those projects, and so we want to make sure we need to have an up or down decision whether we're going to spend that heavy vehicle funds on this project or a different one so that we can deliver on maintaining our roads around the city. So here's the video that I just wanted to show you.
I am now driving down the worst road in Portland. Today is December 30th. It's 9:30 a.m. and I'm on North Subtle Road. North Subtle Road is the home to 2 leading recycling companies that serve businesses and residential customers in Oregon and around Portland. This is probably the worst road in Portland. Recology, oil re-refining company, Les Schwab, and a number of other businesses are represented on this street and have had to contend with terrible road conditions. Today's not bad because the rain has subsided, but on most days the potholes are completely covered and the conditions are horrid. So I just want to bring this to your attention. Whoever on Mr. Novik's staff is qualified to respond to this, we'd sure appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Andrew, we should probably note that we don't want to encourage people to take videos like this and send them in. And my understanding is the legislature is in the process of increasing the fines for people that use their phone while driving. So it's probably the law has changed since this was taken, but and it's very helpful, but we don't want to encourage people to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner. So since 2003, maintenance operations has gone out here 40 times with work orders in attempt to fix the road. I really want to emphasize the problems on Subtle Road are not due to a failure of maintenance. They are due to a failure to construct this road properly in the beginning. And I know that the members of the council got an auditor's report recently about the need to keep our roads maintained. And I think it's just important really to draw a distinction between those roads that you can properly maintain and those that you cannot. And this certainly falls into the latter category. So this is what we have to show for the results of 40 maintenance work orders in 13, 14 years. So just to give an overview of the project, Commissioner Saltzman mentioned this is a big ask, it's $8.5 million, but I think it's also important to put that into perspective. This is a very long street. It's almost 3,000 centerline feet, so you do get a lot for that money. There's nothing salvageable here. This is a full reconstruct. We last had a property owner meeting on February 14th, and in the spirit of compromise with the property owners, what this resolution does is that we would narrow the street from 36 feet to 32 feet to reduce the right-of-way acquisition by 4 feet. We're only proposing a sidewalk on the north side of the street. We're really just trying to keep this project scope to a bare minimum. And we also plan a stormwater outfall to the Columbia River and improve transit access to the nearby bus line. The proposed project cost, and this is not a lowball cost estimate, this is a conservative cost estimate, it's a little over $3,000 per centerline foot. Approximately 24% of that is contingency, and I really want to emphasize that if council approves this LID and we can continue the collaboration between the city and among the property owners, that increases the odds that we can perhaps not use some or all of that contingency.
Andrew, can I ask you a question off this slide?
Sure.
So the proposed funding is $8.5 million LID, and then PBOT absorption of overhead, and then about $800,000 of other sources of funds. So by my reckoning, that's about a 20% match,
Yes.
roughly a 20% match from other sources, direct or indirect sources.
Yes.
How does that compare to other LIDs that we've authorized?
Well, you know, it doesn't move the needle mathematically to a great degree on this particular LID. I mean, this is still a big ask of the property owners, and there's no sugarcoating that. But just to put that into perspective, the LID that you approved last week in another area of North Portland was $819,000. So the funding, the additional funding that we're talking about here, over and above the 1.1 million, the additional 800,000 that we're proposing is almost equal to the entire amount of that residential LID that council approved last week. So, and that, you know, that is a big lift that we did in a short amount of time since our February property owner meeting.
Thank you.
And that would be first dollar of funding. So the idea is we will spend that money before we use the property owner's money. So, and then we did have some discussions about, instead of the square footage methodology, perhaps assessing this LID on a linear footage basis. The property in orange is owned by the Port of Portland, and I want to mention the Port of Portland has not advocated for this, but if we were to switch to a linear footage, we'd have a real disparity because their effective rate per square foot would drop down to 2 cents per square foot, so they would get a 99% reduction in their assessment. You look next door at Supreme Perlite, property shaded in purple, their assessment would go up to $6.80. So for those reasons, I don't recommend that council change the assessment methodology. I just wanted to put this a little bit in financial perspective. When we did the Northeast 148th Avenue LID quite a few years ago, we had an estimate of $2,000 a foot. We were able to bring that particular LID in 28% below budget. I'm not going to promise that we're going to do that here or that we won't need our contingency, but that's really the goal here, is to try to bring this project in below budget because we recognize the sacrifice of the property owners. And I also wanted to mention that when we put the Northeast 148th Avenue LID together, I remember one of the property owners calling me up and saying that the LID was outrageous, that he was never going to benefit from it. 2 years after we completed the LID, I sat in a new building that he had built in the back part of his lot, and he had a ribbon cutting on that building. We had a significant increase in real market value of the properties participating in the LID. I am not going to promise that here, but I think it is fair to say that there's the intensity of development is relatively low on this street. Finally, I kind of wanted to put the time element of the equation into perspective here. So if this council hearing had been back in January 2004, if we had the same scope, we traditionally plan for 5% a year inflation. So instead of $3,200 a foot, we'd be looking at $1,700 a foot. The property owners would have the ability to finance that over 20 years. They'd be on the home stretch of paying off this LID. If we take another 13 years to discuss this LID and we kick the can down the road, we could very easily be back here in 2030, and instead of $3,200 a foot, we're talking over $6,000 per foot. So as we think about the scope options and the cost options, I'm really here to just emphasize that time is not on our side in terms of delaying the decision. And then lastly, one of the things that we typically do on LIDs, we look at the proposed amount of the LID relative to the burden of the properties, to the value of the properties, rather. So this LID amount is 23% of the real market value of the properties on the street. So again, I'm not promising an increase in property values, but there is the potential for this to generate improvements in property values for the property owners. I think more importantly, the lifeblood of industrial land is that you need good access. And as the presentation showed you, we clearly do not have good or safe access here to those properties. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, we have several property owners here to testify.
All right, public testimony. How many people do we have signed up?
We have 6 people.
All right, again, we'll limit it to 2 minutes, please.
Okay, the first 3, please come on up, are Bill Briggs, Susan Barthel, and Corky Collier.
Come on up, thank you.
I must be the first one on the list.
Very good, thank you, sir.
Good morning to you. I've enjoyed sitting here and watching all the wonderful things you guys are doing. I'm Bill Briggs. I'm one of the owners of Oil Refining. We have about 7 acres there. Most of it is wetlands. About half of it has been dedicated to the wetlands, and it's actually an improved facility for a wetland for the DEQ. We did quite a little improvement on it. First of all, that kind of an expenditure for a street for 11 owners to put on means that we have about an $800,000 mortgage added to our property. So in essence, one day your property's paid for, the next day you have an $800,000 mortgage, payable at like $4,500 a month for the 20 years. That's an extreme measure to do. In fact, in my case, it takes my retirement away from me because I don't have an extra $46,000 a month to be paying for that. I think you'll find that's the common problem on the street. I don't want to challenge the presentation you had, but there's a lot of facts in it that should be looked at, and I'd be happy to supply you with that. The 40 times they've been on that street, they may have patched 1 or 2 potholes. I'd like to know what the dollar value was. They've almost completely ignored the street. We do not have a stormwater system on it. We never have, and yet we're paying $130,000 a year for stormwater fees on the street, and we've never had anything. It's been there 120 years. It's survived with the stormwater system that it has, and if it had been taken care of a little bit more the last 5 or 6 years, we probably wouldn't be here. We would hope that as property owners, I'm only speaking for myself because there's plenty of others here, we would hope that you'd assign somebody in the city to look at it to see if you couldn't find $1.5 million in improvement on that street rather than spend $9.5 million on it. We think it will handle that. There's about 750 vehicles a day on there. There's about 500 employees on that street, and in my judgment, about 7 of them may not survive that kind of a concern. In my case, I have to increase my sales $1 million a year in order to be able to pay that $4,500 or $4,600 a month. And that's 20% of my sales. It's pretty difficult to do. This Subtle Road, as you may know, is an odd road. It's been there so long that it used to carry all kinds of traffic because there were 32,000 cars, rail cars down the rail there for the meatpacking industry and the wooden box plant over there. So it's had a lot more traffic. Really doesn't give us much trouble. If you look at my pictures that I sent all of you, some emails and some letters, you'll find that the potholes and all that he's showing you is in a 500-foot street place, and it's the low spot, and it needs to be improved, no question about it.
Thank you.
The rest of the street probably would handle it for another 100 years, but it does need maintenance, and the city has lacked that.
Thank you, sir.
And anything I can answer, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your testimony. 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. I'm Susan Barthel, and I'm not a landowner, but I'm somebody who knows a great deal about this area, having worked out in the area for about 23 years. There's no doubt about it. The road is a mess, and the base of it is a mess. So I disagree with Bill, who happens to be a friend and acquaintance. I think because it scares people and damages cars and trucks, it deserves some attention. There's also no drainage and nothing that treats stormwater. It's surrounded by industrial businesses. You know that. We know that it's sandwiched between the railroad that borders Smith and Bybee wetlands, called Smith and Bybee Lakes originally, and that area is designated a significant bird area, so I'm not excited about runoff going to that area. Therefore, advocating for treated stormwater to go to the Columbia River, even though we do have significant fish there, in some ways having a much bigger water body that's less sensitive would be a good place to put treated stormwater. So I'm going to simply ask you to do this. Take some action to make sure the road is sound and serviceable for the businesses, and make sure the runoff is treated, and preferably that it goes to the Columbia River. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Corky Collier. I'm Executive Director of the Columbia Corridor Association. The landowners who will be paying the lion's share of this LID, if you approve it, are obviously frustrated that the city has not reconstructed the road in the past, and they're scared of the cost of this LID. But at least some agree that it's the necessary step to take. Working with Mr. Abbey, we've managed to come up with some additional funds. We've managed to keep costs constrained. We'll continue to do that. My ask of you is to help find additional funds on top of what we've already done. This is a very, very expensive LID, and the cost is falling on only 20 property owners. I know of one property owner whose child is close to going to college, and the cost of this LID is going to affect the financing of that kid's college education. I think this is a necessary project, and it's being managed very well by Mr. Abbey, and I suggest that you approve it. But let's not forget about this after lunch. Help these property owners repair our infrastructure. They're going above and beyond to put their cash into a city asset. It's the courteous and financial thing to do for you to go above and beyond to help them. Thanks.
Corky, can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
And thank you for being here and for always being a positive voice, a voice of reason on these issues. Mr. Abbey, in one of his slides, documented the benefit to property owners if these things are done well over time in terms of increased property values. And I understand you've made an eloquent plea that we add some additional resources to this. But if this is done right, is it fair to say over time that it will have the effect of increasing the value of some of the property out there?
I think it's fair to say that the property values probably will increase. However, that increase will never cover the cost of this LID. It will never balance out. They're building new stormwater systems, they're reconstructing the street, all things the city normally does on its own. And that's just too big of a bill. It's not going to, the increase in property values is no way going to make up for it. And one of the reasons it's very difficult to do that in an industrial area is because, as you're probably aware, industrial land costs have to remain low. Just the economics of industrial business doesn't allow for very high cost land. It's kind of strange. I don't completely understand it either, because industrial jobs pay higher than average wages, but they require lower than average land costs. That's just the way it is.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I make
Appreciate
one
it.
more? It's in a floodplain that's unprotected, so it's not a piece of industrial land that you can just decide to build everything on.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next three, please.
Next three are Larry Kahn, Jim Brown, and Alan, I believe the last name is Kirby, or Kirby.
Good morning.
Morning. My name's Larry Kahn. I manage property for PMP Properties that sits on the intersection of North Subtle Road and North Portland Road. I've been working this area since 1978 from a brokerage perspective. Been involved with and seen a lot of the various acquisitions that have taken place since that time. I can tell you, I don't think that there will be any increase in value for these properties due to the improvement of Subtle Road. We're trying to keep values as high as we can get them all the time. And so what Subtle Road needs is, in my opinion, some maintenance. The city has said that they are no longer going to provide maintenance for this road, that they never accepted the condition of the road when they annexed the property, which was a surprise to me. And it's always been a road in a similar condition to what it is now. Maybe a little worse, but certainly not significantly worse. It has always been an area that was considered a diamond in the rough in a lot of ways. I represent a lady who's 80 years old, and to add, at one time, the estimate was $1.3 to $1.5 million lien to her property would absolutely devastate her. One thing that no one seems to mention, but when people discuss the fact that these liens will be, when they're paid off, will be a boon to the area, I don't think they're taking into consideration that if you have a mortgage on a property, those mortgages are generally 10-year terms. And so that when those mortgages terminate or mature, if there is a lien on a property, it slides to the first position, and you're not going to be able to get a loan for that increased value.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. My name is Jim Brown. I'm an attorney who's been asked to represent several of the property owners at this meeting. We appreciate the efforts of Mr. Abbey and city staff in studying North Subtle Road and making recommendations to the council. North Subtle Road has been there for over a century. I've driven up it down it for over 30 years now in involvement with clients. There's no doubt that there is need for repair on North Subtle Road. The real question in forming an LID is to what degree of repair is needed. The east end of the road is in much worse shape than the west end. The west end is very serviceable at this point in time. I think primarily it's due to the ability to manage stormwater drainage on the east end that tends to pond, whereas in the west end, the drainage ditch on both the north and south side of the roads are allowing that stormwater to infiltrate, and that doesn't happen on the east end. I think a lot of the problems could be resolved if we were able to manage that stormwater better on the east end and dissipate the drainage, the stormwater throughout the length of the ditch. The other question is, what degree of road is needed? The standard that the city has used is Marine Drive, which is basically constructed to the standard of an interstate. It has orders of magnitude more traffic per day than North Subtle Road. You've got numerous traffic signals on Marine Drive to manage the traffic that's there, whereas on North Subtle Road, we have a stop sign because the amount of traffic is so much less. Property owners received a bid in September to reconstruct about 800 feet of North Subtle Road, which included a 6-inch crushed rock base and a 6-inch asphalt cover. And the cost to do that was $112,000. If you extrapolate that to the entire length of North Subtle Road, that would have been approximately $400,000. And we believe that that road probably would adequately service the traffic usage on North Sutter Road. And there's a big difference between 8.5 million and 400,000. So we respectfully request that if you decide to form the LID, that the city instructs staff to work with the property owners to arrive at a road that meets the needs of the neighborhood, but doesn't put them out of business.
Thank you,
You've got about 400 jobs in that street, and maybe over half of them would be lost simply because they can't afford this road.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate your testimony. Thanks for being here. Is there anybody else signed up for public testimony?
That's all who signed up.
Very good. Andrew, do you want to come back up and perhaps reflect on some of the issues that have been raised?
So Andrew, we would, I was a little confused, somebody said we would not maintain the road if we did the improvements? Is that?
I'm sorry, Commissioner?
There was testimony that the city would not maintain the road once it was improved, is that?
Well, it's
correct?
not an issue of the city not being able to maintain the road. It's just the level of maintenance that the city can provide is extremely limited.
So you're talking about that's for the current road without the improvements?
Yes.
But if we did the LID, then obviously the city would take care of it thereafter.
Yeah, and I think what we're really aiming for here is that we want to build a road that doesn't require a lot of maintenance by anybody, whether it's the private property owners or by the city. We want to build a structural section that works. I mean, a Les Schwab tire truck that comes down Marine Drive is no lighter when it's on Subtle Road than it is on Marine Drive. So while the traffic volumes are obviously much lower on Subtle Road, we still have to build a road section with a certain amount of structural integrity for the vehicles that are operating on the street. And until we address the stormwater issue, when you have pavement sitting in water, that pavement is not going to hold up well over time. So we know it's a big ask, but if council approves this LID, staff are fully committed to minimizing the expense of this LID. If you approve this LID, there would be no expense out of pocket until 2020, and the city would offer financing until 2040. So I think it's important to note we're not asking anybody to write a check in 1 year to pay for this road. This is a long-term investment with long-term financing.
Thank you.
Andrew, could you remind us again, just procedurally, what our role is today? So you've come forward. We have a resolution. You've presented a case, and you're asking us to authorize the formation of a district, which would be subject to a subsequent hearing.
Yes.
We've heard testimony from people that object to the LID. So what is our role and what is the standard we should apply? Could you remind me?
Well, what you have before you is a council-initiated LID. So my role under city code is to make a recommendation to council, and my recommendation to council is that you approve this resolution. Then what would happen is we would formally notify all the property owners, and then we would receive any remonstrances that property owners may choose to submit, and then council would make a final decision in July. I do think that there would be significant benefit to at least calling the question formally. Okay. I think there would be significant benefit to making an up or down decision in July. So if you approve this resolution today, it does not bind the council to approve the formation of the LID in July. But for sake of argument, we're not going to move forward with this LID. I think it's very important that it be on the council record of what the proposed scope is, what the cost is, and who objected, so that if we are back here in 2030 and the costs have gone up significantly, that at least we know that we've had the opportunity to solve the problem today.
And so just I'll put it in just very simple language. If we approve this resolution today, property owners that object to this LID or object to the formula or have other concerns still have their full rights to bring their remonstrances forward, and then we would have a future hearing to decide those issues.
Yes, and I would particularly encourage those property owners to contact me directly so that I can bring any proposed amendment to the LID back to council in July.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fritz?
Thank you. So I have a question for Commissioner Saltzman. I was surprised to hear that Department of Transportation has in the past maintained this road, because certainly in Southwest, which is where I live, and there's a lot, I was interested in the worst road in Portland. It's certainly the longest of the bad roads in Portland, but there's others that I think would vie for that category. So why was PBOT maintaining a street that wasn't up to standard. I thought the rule was that they had to be before the city would take over the maintenance.
Commissioner, it really is just a historical artifact. There were a lot of road transferred from Multnomah County to the city. You know, ultimately, the maintenance started with Multnomah County. I think that'd be a question for them, why they took on that road, but we inherited the road from Multnomah County. So I don't have a good answer for you. I'm frankly very puzzled that either the county or the city ever got stuck with maintaining this road.
Yeah, so I think that's also something to discuss with the property owners and the residents, that is the citywide policy, that we don't maintain streets that are not up to city standards. So that is part of their choice.
I think what it really boiled down to, Commissioner, is as the council well knows, you have a limited amount of resources. We have $11.8 million in 1 year to maintain take care of the landslides, pavement maintenance, et cetera. This LID is 72% of our annual maintenance budget citywide to deal with roads all over the city. So at some point, whether it's maintenance operations or council, we have to exercise some reasonable discretion on how we spend those funds.
Exactly.
And I would submit that they're better spent on much lower cost preventive maintenance options on streets than putting it all into one project.
And you said it's a council-initiated local improvement district. Are there any supportive property owners?
You know, I'm hesitant to characterize positions of property owners. I will tell you that several property owners have told me that they really, I mean, nobody's enthusiastic or excited about this proposal. It's a heavy ask, but I've had several property owners tell me that they acknowledge that the time has come to get this road reconstructed. I think there's a little bit of reticence to sort of put themselves out front and advocate for it, because property owners are sensitive to the overall ask of being made of everybody, and it will be easier for some and harder for others.
And just
And I
I would
certainly
point out, we do have
recognize that.
some letters here that were just handed to us in support of this by Les
Okay.
Schwab and I think the Subtle Road Committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
again, to refer back to Commissioner Fisher's point, if we say yes at this point, you then do some more scoping and come back to council for a formal approval of the project. Is that correct?
Yes, but to be candid with you, Commissioner, I don't expect to see big scope changes or amendments. We've been having this discussion for 13 years. At some point, I have to listen to what the engineers are telling me. When they say we need a 9-on-8 road section, I don't want to cut corners that offer up a 6-on-6, and we spend 85% of the money, and then 5 years the road falls apart because we save $400,000 out of a $8.5 million LID to take 3 inches of asphalt and 2 inches of rock out of the base. That's not wise engineering.
Right, and clearly that's part of the decision too. So if the choice is we're not going to go forward with it, I think we do need to be clear we're not going to maintain it at all.
Right.
And then could you just repeat about the financing? There was the concern about having to start paying $4,500 a month.
Yeah, it's going to be at least 3 years before anybody pays anything, and then they'll have 20 years to finance. And we will look very carefully at possible additional funding sources. I mean, people should budget for what's been proposed, but we will continue to look for additional funding.
And is there any way that they don't have to, excuse me, they don't have to pay and just leave it until the property is sold and then it would
We do not have an option for a deferral, but again, I would just encourage property owners to come to me. We will try to be as creative as we can be. And I guess on a final note, I just want to say these have been very difficult conversations over the past 13 years, and I really want to commend all of the property owners. They have been extraordinarily gracious and cordial amidst these difficult conversations, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions before we call the roll? Commissioner Daly?
I need a couple things clarified. So did you say there's about 20 affected property owners on
Yeah,
this?
there's some property owners own multiple properties, but if you look at unique property owners, there's about 20.
And so with a square foot assessment, how is the cost divided between those property owners? Is it based on their frontage, or is it divided equally?
It's neither of those two is based on the area of land.
That they own?
Yes.
Okay, so they might not have much frontage, but they could have,
Yes.
okay, I got it. And, I mean, I guess I'm a little uncomfortable taking a step that would obligate property owners with very little buy-in and without knowing how much money we're going to, or funding we're going to find. So I just want to make sure I understand if we approve this today, there's still another part of the process
So the
to go
ordinance
through.
that would come back to you in July would have $300,000 of heavy vehicle funding. That's already been set aside. What I can't do is obligate the PBOT STC funding because this street needs to be added to the new STC project list. But there would be a directive in the formation ordinance that would direct staff to include in the PBOT STC project update PBOT STC funding for North Settle Road.
Can I, would my colleague defer for a second?
Sure.
So one of the benefits of this hearing is we now have a record from property owners raising a series of concerns, including opposition to the plan, questions about financing, questions about the mix of funding. We now have a record. That record is now available to LID administrator and the commissioner in charge. And as a council, we can ask when this comes back, what further conversations have they had with the community? Has there been a change in any of the support? The reason I'm going to support this is that this is we're launching a process. We're not deciding the question. And in my experience, with all the caveats that Andrew Abbey has given, if there is an LID to be formed and a deal to be reached, Andrew will go the extra mile to try to bring that to fruition. It may not be satisfactory to each commissioner when it comes back for a vote, but I have great confidence that he'll go the extra mile.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Very good.
Can I just have one more question? Why, it's been 13 years or more, why did you bring this forward now?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, this went dark for several years, and it kind of came back to a head at the end of 2015. You know, when I saw that video, when it landed in my email box, you know, my first sense as a public servant was, well, I need to do something about this. And so that's kind of when we ramped up the outreach. When I first started looking at this project, BES wasn't even sure that they had a way to deal with stormwater. We have some very talented staff in BES that came up with the stormwater solution. We had the heavy vehicle tax that came in. And then last but not least, there was some discussions of forming a homeowners association. And I just felt that it was important to call the question because if maintenance operations with their fleet of vehicles and talented staff can't keep this road maintained, I think it's really setting people up for failure to think that a group of folks can get together on their own for $100,000 and do a better job than maintenance operations. There's no physical solution other than reconstructing the road.
Very good. Carla, please call the roll.
Fish?
Dan, thank you for bringing this forward. Andrew, I love what you just said about how you responded to evidence of a problem. And as a public servant, you felt like you were compelled to try to come up with a solution. It is conceivable, based on what we've heard today, that we won't get to that solution. But you've asked us to launch a process which gives us a fair chance of reaching a resolution. And after all, what we're talking about here is substandard streets, which means they're unsafe for people who use the streets, and long-term infrastructure needs. And you're also responding to complaints that you've received from people in that neighborhood. So we're launching a process today to give you the opportunity to see if you can bring this to fruition. And I appreciate the folks who took time out today to testify because your concerns are now part of the record, and the council will be monitoring those issues as we go forward. Thank you to everyone who participated. Aye.
Saltzman?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for everybody who testified today and also who contacted us via email or letters. This is not the final decision. That point is down the road, and that will allow Andrew to further work his magic. So often he works his magic with property owners to bring them along, but in any case, it'll be open, fair, and transparent decision that we make in sometime this summer. Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
I share, obviously, that lots of concerns have been raised, and I do remember that Andrew in the past has come back and said, actually, we're not going to do this. So I appreciate your work, because I would say 99% of the time you come back and say, yes, we now understand what the choices are. So it's important for the property owners to know that, in fact, in the rest of the city doesn't maintain streets that are not up to public standards. Aye.
Wheeler?
Thank you to everybody who testified today. And Andrew, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your directness in answering the questions. I am concerned when people who are potentially on a fixed income, who potentially have low-margin businesses, are being asked to step up in a significant way. So I know you heard the testimony today, and that you'll work to find a fair resolution before you bring it back to the City Council. So I want to thank you for that and your hard work on this, and I've heard nothing but good about your interactions with the neighborhood. Whether they agree or disagree with you, everybody has said to a person that you have been respectful and you've heard them out, and I think that speaks highly to you, and we appreciate you representing the city well in these conversations. And thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for bringing this forward. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, and I thank those who have been waiting patiently. We're a bit behind schedule, but these were important conversations to have.
Item 462, declare support for Peregrine Sports LLC's proposal to expand Providence Park.
So this resolution is what I would describe as the first step to implement a major expansion of a city-owned stadium. It will be funded with private dollars. These kinds of projects don't typically happen in the way that's being proposed today, and I'm very pleased with the conversations we've had with Peregrine and with the folks at City Hall, and we're appreciative of their willingness to work with us and be flexible on some of the terms of this conversation. I think this is an exciting design, and I think it's a necessary expansion for this facility to make sure that Portland remains Soccer City USA for decades to come. Obviously, there will be much more to this conversation in the coming months, and I look forward to seeing people from the community, fans of the Timbers and the Thorns, people from the community who have other ideas about how best to approach this. We look forward to that conversation. Finally, I just want to state this. While there is no such thing as a free deal, there are always ancillary costs that will be borne by the city with any expansion. The vast share of this proposal is covered by the private sector itself. In fact, this $50 million investment is a private investment for the rehabilitation and expansion of this facility. It is a city-owned facility. And I just want to contrast this with some recent deals that have taken place in other cities. In the city of Las Vegas, the taxpayers put in $750 million on a stadium expansion. In Atlanta recently, $280 million for a stadium expansion. So I'm very appreciative that when Peregrine came to us at the very beginning, we made it very clear that while we certainly saw some benefits to the community and saw the importance of what they were proposing, we really wanted them to step forward first. And I believe through this proposal, they've shown that commitment to do so. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Reinhardt.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler.
Good morning.
Council members. My name is Tom Reinhardt. I'm proud to be your Chief Administrative Officer and Director of the Office of Management and Finance. Susan Hartnett, my colleague, and I are going to do a short presentation on this resolution, then you'll hear from Peregrine. As you know, informal discussions about a possible expansion of the city-owned stadium currently called Providence Park have been quietly happening for a year, and I know your offices have been briefed about that. Today's item is a resolution expressing council's formal support for Peregrine Sports' proposal to expand, and it directs city bureaus to work with them on that effort, specifically for OMF to negotiate the deal terms and necessary formal agreements. To be clear, the resolution that we're bringing to you today just directs us to do that work, and we will be bringing back other actions for you in the coming weeks. The mayor mentioned months. It'll actually be the coming weeks, and I'll explain that at the end. The resolution before you outlines the following. It tells a little bit about the successful story that we all now know of professional soccer here in Portland that led Peregrine to make this proposal. 13,000 people who are on the waiting list for Timber season tickets, and the great enthusiasm for our Portland Thorns. It outlines core elements of Peregrine's proposal: 4,000 additional seats for the stadium at an estimated cost of $50 million that will be fully paid by Peregrine, as the mayor mentioned, and their requested exemption from ticket tax obligation on new seats for a period of 10 years. The resolution also outlines the construction timeline. As we have talked with all of you and your staffs about, Peregrine would like to start this fall and expects the majority of the work to occur between the two MLS seasons. To meet this proposed construction schedule, the passage of this resolution today, assuming you pass it, will be followed in quick succession by several other items on your agenda. So I want to just give you a preview of those so you know what events will be triggered by your action today, assuming you take it. May 17th, on your regular agenda, an emergency ordinance for an amendment to an existing on-call contract that will allow our spectator program that Susan so ably runs. It'll enable them to retain needed owners' reps for the design and construction phases of the expansion. On June 7th, a resolution would be on your agenda to approve a non-binding term sheet covering the deal points and an ordinance approving an exemption from the competitive bid requirements. So that's a little bit of a preview of what will happen if you approve the resolution today. Unless there are questions for Susan and I'm going to invite Mike Golub from Peregrine Sports to come up and talk to you about the resolution.
And then you'll all be available for questions?
And then we will, of course, yes.
Very good. Mike, come on up. If you could just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Twice in 1 week.
Yes. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and council members. I am Mike Golub. I'm the president of business for the Portland Thorns and the Portland Timbers. And we've had just what I would characterize as an incredibly successful partnership with the city, with all of you, your offices, the bureaus, with Susan and her team. And quite simply, the success we've had on the field and off the field over the last 7 years would not be possible without the partnership we have with the city. The Thorns Championship, the Timbers Championship, the All-Star Game, many amazing moments on the field by both clubs, and all the things we do off the field, our waiting lists, our sellouts, the work we do in the community. Really, without the foundational partnership we have with all of you, would not be possible. So thank you, first of all. And we believe that the expansion that we're contemplating, that you're considering today, and the collaboration on this new chapter in Providence Park, we think is a natural evolution of where this partnership is, where the stadium is, where the industry and the league is going. And as Mayor Wheeler said, we think it's a necessary one to really ensure a successful future for the city, for our fan base, for the stadium, and for our club. So again, thank you for your collaboration. We appreciate all the time and effort that Tom and his team and all of you and your staffs have put into this.
Mayor?
Commissioner Fish.
Mike, thanks for joining us, and thanks for the excitement you brought to our city with two fantastic soccer teams. Two questions. One is, if we authorize this and you grow the stadium to 25,000 seats, does that make us eligible for sporting events that we currently miss out on because of the size of our stadium?
We do. As I think we've shared with you, Providence Park currently is in the lower half of capacity in the league, and that's only going to change as more and more new venues come online in our league. And there are some events, concerts, other events that really need a larger capacity. We're talking to some promoters now about some big shows that would bypass Portland if they didn't have a larger capacity. Moreover, we're really hopeful to have the men's and women's U.S. national team return to Portland for World Cup qualifiers, friendlies, and again, given the growth of the sport in our country, they are needing larger capacity. So the economic impact and the ability to draw events, we think, will be very well served if expansion does proceed.
And the second question, Mike, has to do with the just quantifying the extent of the waiver of the ticket tax. And let me put it as succinctly as possible. I believe that waiving the ticket tax in consideration of the public investment that's being made to expand and enhance a facility owned by the city is in the public interest. We can quantify what that means, assuming you're wildly successful and you fill all the seats. The one thing we can't quantify as precisely is the displacement effect that could occur if existing ticket holders in seats that are subject to the tax migrate over to seats that are not subject to the tax. Number one, how do we quantify that? And number two, what assurances can you give us that we are in effect being asked to waive a specific amount of tax revenue?
Sure, a couple questions in there, Commissioner Fish. Let me address them one at a time, please. As it relates to the tax exemption we're seeking, what we're asking for is through our investment, we are positioning the city to derive ticket tax revenue that they would not otherwise derive. We're simply asking for a delay in that.
Right.
So beyond our exemption and going forward through the length of our operating agreement, and then beyond, which is not immaterial to the discussion, the city will be deriving material amounts of new ticket tax revenue by virtue of the expansion. And Commissioner Fritz raised the question the other day about the Thorns. As it relates to the Timbers, we're sold out. As you know, we have a waiting list of 13,000, so all the seats are going to be occupied. So the city will not forego any ticket tax on existing seats because they're going to be filled, as they have been for each of our games over the last 7 years. As it relates to the Thorns, we never contemplated the Thorns when we did our original deal with the city in 2010, 2011. We're unbelievably proud to have launched the Thorns and see it flourish the way it has. As many of you know, it is the most well-attended women's sports team in the world, period. It's pretty darn cool. The business has grown dramatically. The Thorns business has grown dramatically every year, and we expect that trajectory to continue. So financially, I think all of us involved will benefit from the Thorns continuing to grow, and we think the expansion will only be further catalyst to the Thorns' growth. So I think it's going to be additive to all of us and not dilutive.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. So on that point, I recognize this resolution today is just giving the blessing to go forth and negotiate a contract. So I would like to see something in there that does safeguard the ticket taxes that are currently paid on the Thorns seats. I'm not sure exactly how you're going to do this, but to make sure that people are not moving to a seat where you will get the ticket taxes and we won't. Because as we all know, as wildly successful as the Timbers and the Thorns have, it's still an investment of public money that it enabled the whole stadium expansion to work. So I'd like that to be considered. The other thing that is concerning to me, I believe that the Blazers contract is up in the Moda set in the Rose Quarter in 2025. I'm looking at Susan Hartnett, yes. So to the extent that currently Blazer ticket taxes are helping to pay the financing for Providence Park, if for some reason that the Blazers no longer are at the Moda Center, then we will have a very challenging situation in which the general fund will be responsible for paying off the Providence Park debt. So I would hope that there would be something in the contract that would speak to a willingness to look at a different scenario, to do something about that to help the city out to minimize the general fund risk as part of the contract negotiations.
Noted. Thank you.
Commissioner Fish.
Mike, one other question. Your league is expanding, and we're seeing stadiums built all over the country, and some of them are suburban-style stadiums that are not as accessible as ours. And some are bigger. They have more seating, and they're starting from scratch. I asked you this question when you came in to brief me, but I was so proud of your answer, I thought I'd give you a chance to say it publicly. Why do you, as an ownership group, want to make a big investment in this stadium versus replacing it with a larger stadium in another location?
You know, we realize we have a very unique relationship with our fan base, many of whom are here today, with the community at large, with the city, and we realize that Providence Park is uniquely situated. There's amazing, rich history at that location, and we want to be there for the long term. And this expansion that we're all contemplating increases our commitment to doing that. One of our biggest fears is that at the end of our operating agreement, which expires in 2035, if we don't do this, that Providence Park isn't viable and we'd be forced to look elsewhere. We don't want to do that. We are committed to being where we are, and we think this expansion will help us do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Udaly.
Thank you. Well, in the last couple months, I have learned more than I ever knew there was to know about our spectator venues, and I still have a long ways to go. I'm generally supportive of the expansion. I think it's a beautiful design. I share some of Commissioner Fritz's concerns. I realize that the $50 million is coming from your end, but I want to make sure that I understand the impact on our spectator venue maintenance fund and the impact on our obligation to maintain this increased size, the potential of diluting tickets on the side where we are taking a commission. And I guess I'm curious, do you have a timeline for how long you think it would take Peregrine to recoup the $50 million through increased ticket sales?
On the latter question, Commissioner Udaley, there's still a lot of moving parts. The design is still not in final form. The costs are possibly going up. We haven't set ticket prices, so there's a lot of moving parts yet. So for us to definitively state what sort of our economics are is challenging. It's many years. We know that. As it relates to the first part of your question or comments, we believe if you look at this deal on its own merits, which I think is what you're doing today, it's really hard to argue that there's a material return on investment. There's some additional costs that the city may face, as you pointed out, but there's no upfront investment.
Right.
And there's long-term material upside for the city predicated on our private investment. So I think, and we want this. We want this to be a win for the city, and we want this to be a win for the fan base. And obviously, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't feel it was a good thing for the club. And we're hopefully crafting a deal that reflects that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fish, did you have a? Fine. Very good. If you could just hang out, we'll take some public testimony. Is there public testimony on this item?
Yes, we have 3 people signed up: Robert West, Charles Bridgecrane Johnson, and Scott Swearingen.
Just sit down over there, thanks. Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Charles Bridgecrane Johnson. And as the mayor already noted, this is kind of unique. We're doing professional sports venues much different than Mr. Adelson in Las Vegas. And I thank Commissioner Udaley and Commissioner Fritz for their concern that even on the generally positive financial picture, we still have the question of we've got a bunch of sold-out seats that we have, ticket revenue tax that we're collecting, the new seats. Will people switch? But as Peregrine has pointed out, it's still a little unclear what type of seating they're going to construct, how many nosebleed seats, how many premium seats. I think that one thing that is missing, and perhaps if Peregrine comes back up, we'll hear how well Portland is doing as a professional sports venue with equity. What is the scoping of the ticket prices? Is there any pressure to have them look at the feasibility of seats that aren't nosebleed but are still affordable, so that the whole of the Portland community can enjoy the Thorns and the Timbers? Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Scott Swearingen. It's good to be back in front of several of you and some of you for the first time. I am representing the 107 Independent Supporters Trust, which is the engine behind the Timbers Army as well as the Rose City Riveters. I went through this process in 2010, 2011, and I'm glad to be back here with this deal in particular, especially with the private money. I'll keep it short, but we are in support of this resolution and this expansion. The main thing that we are challenged with as an organization, especially on the timber side, is that we are constrained within our north end sections. We represent over 5,000 paying members this year, and our ability to get any of those paying members into the stadium is hamstrung by the overall capacity. As a population within the stadium, we're aging out because there's no ability to get fresh faces in. As part of the stadium expansion, it will open up the ability for people to move within the stadium who already have tickets and get some of those new faces in and into the Timbers Army sections, into the Rose City Riveter sections, and allow us to continue to grow and thrive. Because our goal is to be the greatest supporters the world's ever seen. We start popping up on a lot of international media as like one of the best places to catch a game in the world. We'd like to continue that, and to do that, adding this renovation and this additional capacity will really aid everyone involved, and our members especially.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think one important thing we've overlooked is that in the age of smartphones, we might have a way that we can impose special surcharges on Sounders fans. Of course, we don't want to war back and forth when we're there, but I think that's very important to research. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there any more public testimony?
That's all who signed up.
Mike, could you come back up? Because there were a couple of interesting points that have been raised. And the first is around, it's my understanding, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in the conversations that we have had and that staff has had, staff to staff, it is obvious that your intention is not to play a shell game with regard to the spectator funds on the Thorns. It's my understanding that we could reach an agreement whereby those funds would be stabilized.
Absolutely. We're coming at this truly with a win-win proposition in mind. We also realize that a healthy spectator fund is good for us. And so we want to do the right thing. And so we're, if resolution passes today and we continue in negotiations, we will work hard at achieving that right balance that you alluded to.
Thank you. And I don't necessarily want to put you on the spot, but I thought it was a really interesting comment. The question about is there an opportunity as we go forward to talk about some lower income opportunities for people to be able to participate in what's obviously a phenomenal sporting opportunity.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Johnson's comments and questions. And one of the things we're so proud of with the Timbers and Thorns, that we're very affordable and very accessible. You can come to a Thorns game for $12. You can have a season ticket in the Timbers Army, and if you're willing to sleep out overnight, sit in the front row for $24. And so soccer, relative to the other major sports in our country, is highly affordable. It's one of the engines behind our success. And what expansion will allow us to do is to keep those prices at an affordable level. As we've talked about, we've been sold out. We have a waiting list. Yet we haven't. Simple economics would say you have all this demand, you could raise prices aggressively. We haven't. And so the affordability and accessibility that's at the heart of soccer is critical to us as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your answers. Any further questions or comments? Carla, please call the roll. Mike, you're welcome to take a seat.
Thank you.
Fish?
Well, first, I just have to declare a conflict of interest. My son and my daughter are soccer snobs, and we go to a lot of Thorns games, and it's some of the best times in my life is to sit with my kids watching the best women in the world play soccer and to wear Kendall Johnson's jersey to root on for a local star. This is not a hearing to address the design, and that is subject to other legal process, so it would be inappropriate to comment on the design. But I will comment that I think it was inspired to ask architect Brad Klofel to work with your team for two reasons. One is he's one of the most famous architects in the world, and most of his work is done outside of Oregon. So the fact that he would have an opportunity to design something iconic here, not editorial comment, something here, is important. And the second thing is during Design Week, he was featured at an event, and not a lot of people know this, but in the most important competition currently in the world for a memorial, he's been chosen as a finalist to design the Holocaust Memorial in the city of London, England. And that honor of being a finalist has gone to a number of the most prominent architects in the world. So it's kind of neat that someone of that caliber is on your team. I've been on the council from the very beginning of this process, and back in 2010, 2011, we had a very spirited discussion about the level of public investment in a vision that Mr. Polson had. And as you know, Mike, at the time, I could not get my arms around the city putting substantial resources into both a soccer stadium and a baseball venue. And my ultimate decision was reached on the basis of conversations I had with our financial team, including our chief financial officer. I was very proud subsequently to vote on an ordinance which went with a soccer stadium-only option, which was based on a new set of financing, which I thought was more in the public interest. Today, who could have forecast that we'd be here talking about a franchise that has already won a national championship or 2 national championships in both teams, and that is bringing the best of professional soccer to our community? The mayor, I think, is correct to look at the experience of other cities around the country, because cities that have invested hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money in these bigger and bigger stadiums have often found it is not a good deal for the taxpayer. It is a good deal for the owners, but not for the taxpayer. So when I heard that you and the ownership group was coming forward and saying, we're ready to make a $50 million investment in the city's stadium, I was very pleasantly surprised, and I think it's enormously generous. What you have asked as part of this deal is that we waive a tax on tickets that would not exist but for your $50 million investment. Let's be clear, if the city doesn't want the expansion, then they won't have the tickets. We won't be generating the taxes anyway. So we're either going to give green light to this opportunity, and since you haven't asked for any direct public subsidies, it seems to me it is reasonable to ask that our modest contribution be the taxes generated on seats that would not otherwise be generated unless you invested $50 million. I wish more people came forward to the city with deals like that. And we're not here, in my view, to debate every aspect of the Visitors Development Fund and every bucket and the holistic system. We're looking here at one stadium and one deal, and I have concluded this is in the public interest to proceed on these terms, and I thank you and Merritt Paulson for really the spectacular benefit you've brought to our community with 2 successful soccer clubs. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I think this is a wise investment. As our decision back in 2010, 2011, it was a wise decision to partner with Peregrine Sports to produce the tremendous success the city has experienced under having the Portland Timbers and the Portland Thorns. You have lived up to everything that was committed to, and then some, which includes revenues to the city. So this additional investment of private dollars for a modest forgiveness of ticket tax for a period of 10 years, I believe, I think is a wise leverage of city resources to produce a $50 million investment and to better serve our residents in their enjoyment of all the excitement and magic that is the Timbers and the Thorns. So I'm very pleased to support this. Aye.
You, Daly?
Well, Commissioner Fish, I certainly wasn't wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth. I just feel that it is my responsibility to understand what kind of liability that we're agreeing to, even though we're not outlaying cash up front. And I will continue to explore that. Aye.
Fritz?
I've got my Rosie of the Rivers scarf here. And Scott Swearingen did say that we aim to be the greatest supporters in the world. I think we're there. I don't know of any other supporters club that is so public-spirited. And Mr. Johnson raised the issue of ticket costs. You can get 2 free Thorns tickets with a fill-up of gas in some places. And there's always people who are donating tickets that you can pick up at the Van Leyden if you get there early enough. So it's a very mixed group, especially for the Thorns game. It's all different ages, all different kinds of folks who are just enjoying a relatively inexpensive family day out. And I very much appreciate that aspect of it. This resolution refers to the 10-year tax diversion, so because the Peregrine will be keeping the tax. It's not like the tax won't be there. The seat prices will remain the same after the 10 years. It says that in the whereas clauses. It doesn't yet say it in the resolved. So I'm hoping that, I know that our team from the Office of Management and Finance will be negotiating a good deal for everybody, to be really clear. I also want to particularly thank Mike Golub, who, as Commissioner Fish referred to, he's not only on the chair of the board of the Regional Arts and Culture Council, Council. He and I have been having discussions over many years now about paid internships for the Thorns players. It's one of the big areas of our community in Oregon where the gender difference in pay is stark and disgraceful. And that's because of the way that the National Soccer Federation, or whatever they call it, sounds like the Empire Strikes Back, that they set the rules. But the national team players for the Thorns get paid a decent wage, and the other local heroes, as Commissioner Fish mentioned, Kendall Johnson and others, they don't. So what Mr. Golub and I are going to be doing over the next few weeks, and hopefully we'll have something to prepare for the next council vote, is a formal internship programs reaching out to the Thorns and the Timbers sponsors to introduce the wonderful young players who come to Portland to be part of the greatest team in the world, and maybe hopefully will stay in our city. We were very happy to host one of the Thorns as an intern in Portland Parks and Recreation this past year, and as a pilot project, and with the success of that, I'm sure we can build on it. So thank you for your partnership in that. It really is about the whole game. It's not just a game. It's about the whole experience for players and families, and I appreciate what our city has done. Aye.
Wheeler.
I first of all just want to say I believe the Timbers and the Thorns are amongst the best sporting franchises anywhere in the world. And as a dad, this has been a really positive and personal thing for me. I personally have always been involved in sports that are lousy spectator sports. And so it's been hard to inspire my young daughter to be interested in something like triathlon. When you watch it on channel 387 or whatever channel it is, it's like watching paint dry. And then there was the day I took her to the Thorns, and she had never expressed any interest in sports at all until we got to the Thorns game. And all of a sudden, when she saw all these women on the field, she was suddenly riveted. And she asked if we could move down closer, and we went down closer. She was leaning into the game the whole time. And she asked me afterwards if she could get a jersey. And so we went up and she got a jersey. And I'm very happy to say she wears that jersey all the time, maybe more than she should, but she wears it all the time. So that's the personal story. But now I have to take you back to the beginning. I was also at the hearings that were held by this city council when Merritt Paulson was here and Mike and others were talking about their original vision. And while I supported the Timbers and I supported their efforts to expand the stadium, I opposed the financing mechanism that was being proposed at the time, which was the use of tax increment financing. And the reason I opposed it was because it was taking not only resources away from other valuable county programs, and I was, of course, sitting at that table, not this table, but I also opposed it because it meant the public was taking the risk. And if this vision that these individuals had didn't actually pan out, the reality is we would still need to expend tax increment financing to pay off the bonds that would have been issued for the expansion of the stadium. And so when I was first approached by Merritt Paulson and Mike about an expansion, I'll be honest with you, I started to get sweaty palms. And I was very pleased over the course of several conversations that now that they are an established franchise and their proof of concept has been proven beyond any doubt, and now that they can actually look back on their most optimistic business plans, their pro formas, and be able to state with a straight face that they exceeded even their most optimistic scenarios of how this experiment would turn out in Portland with a major stadium expansion and the creation of a new franchise system. This deal to me is as good a deal as any public jurisdiction anywhere in the United States has ever been able to put together with a private sector sports team. And it is as a result of their preparation and their leadership in bringing a really incredible opportunity to the city of Portland. And what we're doing here by passing this resolution is both acknowledging the value of that effort that took place here, and recognizing that there is still a tremendous amount of upside potential, not just for the Timbers and the Thorns and Peregrine, but for the community at large. So I'm very supportive of this effort. I will tell the Chief Operating Officer, the Chief Administrative Officer, you also heard Mr. Reinhardt that there are some other issues that the council would still like to have conversations about, and I know you and Mike and others will take those conversations seriously going forward. But this is the necessary first step. I thank my colleagues for listening to my long-winded speech. I vote aye, the resolution is adopted.
Mayor,
Thank you all.
can we take a 2-minute break and then do a time check?
Let's do a 2-minute break and think on this during your 2 minutes. My preference would be that we continue to 1. If people are able to continue to 1, we'll see how far we get through the agenda, and then we'll talk about it at 1. Does that work? All right, we're adjourned for 2 minutes. We're in recess. the next two items. We're only taking a vote on one, but if you could read them together, and then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Saltzman.
467, revised city code language regarding council subpoena powers. And 468, authorize city attorney to exercise city authority to subpoena books, documents, and other records to determine scope of private for hire legislation to protect the public health, safety, and welfare within the incorporated boundaries of the city of Portland.
Commissioner Saltzman.
Thank you, Mayor. What we have before us is a change to an ordinance, which is an emergency, and also then a resolution to issue a subpoena for documents from Uber. And I'll sort of paint the roadmap, and then I'll turn it over to the attorneys to fill in the details. This March, the New York Times published an investigation of Uber's use of Grayball, a sophisticated software tool used to evade government officials and their attempts to enforce consumer and safety protections. As part of its investigation, the New York Times cited the experience of Portland regulators who, when Uber illegally entered the Portland market in December of 2014, tried to book Uber rides, but found those rides being canceled. At the time, Portland officials suspected that there was an effort on Uber's part to avoid regulators, but it was not until the New York Times investigation that we understood how sophisticated and widespread Uber's evasion truly was. Immediately following the disclosure of the Grayball tool, as outlined in the New York Times article, I directed the Portland Bureau of Transportation to conduct an investigation into the use of Grayball in the city of Portland, and to determine if there were any signs that a similar tactic is still used by Uber to avoid regulation. The Portland Bureau of Transportation worked closely with my staff over the 45-day period to conduct an investigative audit to look in depth at the 2,300 compliance and field audits, commonly known as inspections, conducted by regulatory enforcement specialists. And we also requested ride data provided by the transportation network companies, both Uber and Lyft, and posed 8 specific information requests that were outlined in a letter addressed to Uber's CEO, Travis Kalanick, sent for myself and Mayor Wheeler on March 15th, 2017. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Portland Bureau of Transportation, specifically Leah Treat, Chris Warner, Mark Williams, Dave Benson, our city attorney Ken McGarr, and their staffs for their tireless work during this time and for this effort that went into producing the detailed report. While the Portland Bureau of Transportation report didn't find any indication that Grayball is still used by Uber in the city of Portland, they have recommended some programmatic and code changes that will strengthen our role and efficacy as a regulatory body. And we will be bringing forward some code changes in light of that, what we have learned and what we will learn, we believe, from the subpoena at a later date.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
As part of our investigation, we called on Uber to supply us with the data and other critical information that would help us to fully assess their activities here in Portland and the extent of their attempt to evade our efforts to protect the public. Unfortunately, Uber has not complied with our request, and that is why I feel very strongly that the City Council must use one of the most powerful tools at our disposal, our legislative subpoena power, in order to obtain the requested records Uber has yet to provide, namely the Grayball playbook and its associated software. After we authorize the city attorney to issue the subpoena, it is my hope that I will have the support of council, as I said earlier, to come back in the coming months with a slate of code revisions that will be informed by both what comes of this process and the recommendations I've received from the Private for Hire Advisory Committee and also the Bureau of Transportation. I support ride sharing in Portland and believe that it provides many benefits to our community. We as a council fully support expanding transportation options for— however, as a regulatory body, charged with ensuring the safety of the public, we must also ensure everyone in the industry is playing by the rules, providing universal service, and acting ethically. So I want to thank my colleagues for joining me in signing on to this resolution we'll consider, for co-sponsoring it. It sends a strong message that we collectively stand firm in our right to subpoena these documents that will inform our legislative and regulatory processes. It is my hope that the City of Portland and Uber can have a mutually beneficial partnership going forward. And in order for that to happen, I believe this is a necessary and right thing to do on behalf of all Portlanders. And now I'd like to turn it over to, I think, Ben Walters and Tracy Reeve, who are going to talk about the ordinance and the resolution a little bit more.
So I'm your City Attorney, Tracy Reeve, and with me is Chief Deputy City Attorney Ben Walters. Ben is going to briefly address the ordinance, which contains some code changes, and then I'll briefly address the legislative subpoena.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'm Ben Walters with the City Attorney's Office. So the power to conduct investigations.
Ben, is that mic on?
Oh, there we go. Sorry. The power to conduct investigations is inherent in the legislative process. This power encompasses inquiries concerning the administration of existing laws as well as proposed or possibly needed legislation. The authority vested in the council is both explicit in the charter, various provisions, and inherent in the council's legislative powers. There's existing code language addressing that subpoena authority. I was around the last time the council did this, back when they were asking for records from PGE, and Tracy assisted in that capacity when that subpoena was challenged by PGE in Multnomah County Circuit Court. In looking back upon that experience, we looked at the code and came up with some modifications to avoid some of the complicating issues that were experienced in that last go-around and to provide some clarification in the process going forward so that both the city and any entities that might be the recipient of a subpoena will have a clearer understanding of how to move forward once the subpoena is issued. So if there's any questions regarding the code amendments, I'm here and available to answer those questions.
I just have one question. Could you clarify any potential risks between our decision to investigate independently, which I strongly support, and the federal criminal investigation just announced? Is there any potential overlap, and are we at any risk of potentially interfering with that process at the federal level?
Mayor, if the response that we receive is relies upon Fifth Amendment protections in order to deny the request for production, or at this point, all the subpoena is for the production of records. And ordinarily in a corporate setting, and I'm advised of this by lawyers in our office who are more familiar with these issues, corporations, at this point in time, the courts do not recognize that corporations have self-incrimination protection. And so we'd have to undertake an evaluation of that. But we are cooperating with the U.S. Attorney's Office in California, and we would probably confer with them. We don't want to jeopardize any of that process.
Very good, thank you. Any further questions? Commissioner Fish?
I'm going to support this, and I thank Dan Saltzman for his leadership in bringing this forward. Dan, there were some additional findings in the PBOT report that I wanted just to flag. And when I, back in time, cast a no vote in terms of allowing Uber and Lyft and others to operate in Portland, one of the concerns I had was about trust. One of the concerns that another of my colleagues, Commissioner Fritz, had was about consumer protection and adequacy of insurance protections. And in this very thoughtful report that PBOT under Dan's leadership has issued, it appears to me that fully a quarter of the operators who were subject to random checks could not produce a valid insurance certificate. And that is very alarming. And I wonder, Dan or council, if you could comment about that and what additional steps we're going to do to ensure that what I believe are already inadequate insurance standards are followed. And if someone can't produce a company insurance certificate, then it raises the question about whether the operator of that vehicle is under the misunderstanding that they can use their personal car insurance rather than commercial insurance, which again puts the consumer at undue risk. Could we get a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I'd invite up Mark Williams from the Portland Bureau of Transportation, who is in charge of our regulatory program here. And
I'm not sure if this is on. Okay,
yeah, it's on.
it is. Thank you. So Mark Williams, I'm Regulatory Division Manager. The insurance, during the field audits, the drivers aren't carrying a copy of the TNC insurance, but the TNCs are covered.
Well, then, but according to figure 1.7 on page 12 of the report, it says non-compliant, and then underneath says company insurance. So PBOT has determined that these drivers are non-compliant. So in what way are they non-compliant concerning insurance?
They're just not carrying a paper copy of the insurance. So it's a problem that we've had with many of the TNC drivers in the past. We first required them to carry a digital copy. When we updated the code back in 2016, the requirement was to carry a non-digital copy, so just a paper copy of the insurance. So when they don't have that, we do record them as being and are non-compliant.
So they have the insurance, they may not have the paperwork.
They just don't have the paper copy.
And they have the insurance because the TNCs have represented, by some agreement, agreed to provide umbrella insurance for all the drivers?
Correct. So Uber and Lyft provide coverage in all 3 periods for all the TNC drivers. And the TNC periods, the type of coverage varies obviously between period 1 and 2 and 3.
But how do we know, sir, that a driver is not submitting a claim to their personal insurance as opposed to the Uber corporate umbrella coverage?
Well, that is the reason for them being required to carry the paper copy.
So that's the point I wanted to get at.
Yes.
And since we cannot, so this has the effect of not only being a violation of our rules, but it also at least opens the door to people seeking to evade using the corporate umbrella insurance and using their private insurance, which would in turn make it more difficult for you to track accidents and claims, correct?
Well, possibly. So it would be, I would consider an enormous disadvantage to a TNC driver to present their own personal insurance in the event of an accident. That insurance is in place mostly to protect the consumer, or in the event that the driver is liable for the accident. What we don't want to happen is if a TNC driver hits you in your car, we don't want him to present his or her personal insurance. Eventually, what happens is that the insurance companies eventually figure out this was a accident that was caused while they were operating on the platform, and Uber and Lyft's insurance will eventually kick in, but it does delay the process. So rather than a claim being settled in 45 days or less, it could be as far out as 6 months. So it's really important that if they have an accident, that they present the appropriate insurance so that the claim processors can head down the appropriate route initially.
And finally, Mr. Williams, what's the fine for not carrying a company insurance certificate?
Currently, the fine is $50. If you don't have, that's the first initial offense, and it goes up from there. I believe it goes from 50 to about 150.
Do you think that's adequate?
We are making recommendations to present to council at a later time to increase that minimum fine from 50 to 250.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy? Please.
So I just wanted to address that the legislative subpoena power is not you're not granting a new authority here. This is a long-established authority that legislative bodies have has been mentioned and was used previously in the PGE situation. But as Ben mentioned, what we did not have is a process in place that specifically set forth the rules, if you will, for how that works. And so in order of clarity for everyone, we're setting that forth. But the legislative subpoena authority is a long-established authority that you have that is inherent in the nature of a legislative body so that you have the ability to investigate and determine whether legislative changes, new legislation is appropriate. And so the legislative subpoena that you would be authorizing us to issue in the resolution is directed at getting the information from Uber that we haven't previously gotten, the Gray Ball playbook, software, other information about how they've been using this technology, because we don't have any facts, and I don't mean to suggest that at this point there are any facts to suggest that this is being used for other purposes, but it's certainly, depending on the nature of the technology, it is of concern, could it be used for other improper purposes, and is that something that council might want to address, which is why we're more broadly wanting to get the playbook and evaluate how this technology works, what other areas it could be used in, and is specific legislation appropriate that would avoid that occurring.
So it's to inform our legislative and regulatory efforts on
Exactly.
private for-hire transportation. Right.
Exactly.
Tracy, one other question, because I think there's some confusion in the public. Today, we're being asked to authorize the issuance of a legislative subpoena, but we are also going to come back to council in a couple of weeks with an ordinance or a resolution to authorize administrative subpoenas so that the Department of Revenue can collect data from companies that are not currently complying with our laws in the sharing economy other than Uber. What's the distinction?
Well, an administrative subpoena is in aid of enforcing a legislative scheme that is already in place. So council has a legislative scheme in place for taxing and regulating short-term rentals. And that will give us explicit subpoena authority to get the information we need to apply that regulatory code. So it's not looking at what information do we need for you all to be able to make informed legislative judgments. It's directed at allowing the regulators to implement the legislative program that you've already adopted, and with any changes that you make to implement that short-term rental regulatory scheme.
Thank you.
Thank you, all. I don't know if there's any testimony.
Is there any public testimony?
I believe one person is left, Charles Bridge Crane Johnson.
Very good. Come on up.
Recently? Did they send a letter?
Good afternoon.
Objecting?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Yes. Okay. So I want to thank Commissioner Fish for going in there with the administrative subpoenas, because when we talk about fairness, we want to make sure that all of the new falsely labeled sharing economy companies can be concerned that the public will know what they're really doing. And so I only wish that the administrative subpoena process could have been sped up so that Airbnb or similar situated companies would know that we want to really know how involved they are in deceiving people about the effect they're having on our housing market, the fact that we live in a city where thousands of people are sleeping outdoors and on the streets. To the specifics of Gray Ball and Uber, it was interesting to hear that corporate personhood doesn't extend perhaps to the Fifth Amendment. So I appreciate your zeal here, which is really where the city needs to put its zeal. Earlier today, on item 455, we heard from an individual, a person who was screwed over by this community to the tune of having to pay a $250,000 bond to get out of jail for a situation that within months, the district attorney said, no case, dismissed. So one of the things that a municipal corporation needs to do is be governed by real people who put real people first, so that we don't have situations where actual real human beings are abducted by armed thugs out of Starbucks, framed with $250,000 extortion that then disappears through the legal process when cooler heads realize that a bunch of armed thugs in the police department exaggerated the situation. So please save your zeal for situations like that for Uber, Airbnb, billionaires hiding down in San Francisco, undermining the quality of life while telling everybody they're running something they falsely label as sharing economy here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. The City of Portland has found no evidence that Uber has used gray ball or any technology to avoid city inspectors. Again, I think what the city is doing right now is just a witch hunt. You're positioning yourself based upon the DOJ investigation to negotiate a settlement agreement, them not admitting any guilt. They're not going to supply you any records. It's not going to happen. The program was designed as a safety program, basically to make sure that their drivers aren't harmed. They're going to prove that. And again, you're just positioning yourself in a way to try to get money from them. And as you know, Uber's getting ready to do an IPO, whether it's in the next year or so. This is going to affect their value on that. I hope Travis Kalanick will come back and sue the city, maybe for $1 billion, just to let you know, you don't have anything here. It's a witch hunt. You're going after Travis Kalanick. And you know what's interesting here is that you allowed Uber to come in and Lyft into this city and create an app in their platform that has decimated the local cab companies that have been here for years. And now you're surprised that Uber is creating software that you're claiming is monitoring you at the same time and your regulators. Well, again, don't be surprised. At the end of this, you'll find out that everything they're doing is legal. Everything it's doing will proceed forward. And again, he'll get the highest value for his IPO when he rolls out Uber. And again, he can thank you for that. He can thank you for that. And I noticed on this resolution, all of the commissioners submitted this resolution and pushed it forward. Well, isn't that great to the taxi cab companies in this city that have lost everything? You're hypocritical, you'll get nothing from Uber, and they'll win at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. So we, sorry?
That's all who signed up.
Oh, very good. Any further council discussion?
Mayor, just since Lightning is someone who testifies a lot and often makes cogent and thoughtful comments, just want to correct the record on one thing he said. In the investigative report that Commissioner Salzman brought forward to the council, Uber acknowledged they used the technology to evade and deceive regulators. That's an admission, and that's in a letter from their attorney, so it's not a claim or an unfounded claim. They have acknowledged, but they've also stated that they have discontinued using it. And one of the things we're going to do is verify whether that's accurate. But I want to clarify that. They did acknowledge it using the technology.
So item 468 is a first reading, and so I will.
It's an emergency.
It's an emergency.
468 is not.
467.
Resolution.
I'm talking about 468. 468 is a non-emergency first reading.
It's a resolution.
It's a resolution. So we're going to vote on both.
Oh, you're right. I stand corrected. If only I could learn to read. So let's take them in order then. 467, please call the roll.
Fish?
I am very proud to support this ordinance today, and I want to begin by thanking the Transportation Commissioner for the aggressive way that he has pursued the truth in this case. I reread the report the other night that Dan and his department issued, and I think it's a model of an investigative report, so I compliment the commissioner, the director, and the legal team that worked on it. I was mildly surprised once the report issued that Uber chose to once again revert to its combative nature rather than to seek a conciliatory attitude. And I was struck when I was contacted by a reporter who asked me to respond to a statement that Uber issued, did not have the courtesy of sharing it with the council, but issued, and it has the following sentence. It is unfortunate this investigation and the report have become so politically charged, and that Commissioner Fish has used the process to make baseless claims about our conduct in Portland. So first of all, let me say that I consider it an insult to suggest that Commissioner Saltzman at any stage of this proceeding has been politically motivated. And I would challenge Uber to come forward with one shred of evidence to support that claim. And to attack the integrity of this body and the commissioner as a way of deflecting attention away from their acknowledged misconduct is the kind of behavior we take for granted in Washington, D.C., but is somewhat new to Portland, Oregon. The second thing I want to say is, since the person who issued this statement also chose to make an attack on me personally, Mayor, point of personal privilege. I want to just review what's in the record, because we don't want there to be any suggestion that the council is making claims that are not supported by the facts. And these are the claims that have been made at various points in this proceeding. The first is that when Uber entered the marketplace, they operated illegally. We have made that claim, and we believe our law supports that. In fact, the city of Portland brought a lawsuit to compel Uber to cease their illegal operations. Number two, Uber has now acknowledged through an attorney submission that they used a technology called Grayball to evade and deceive regulators. If the statute of limitations on fraud had not run, I believe we would have a number of legal claims we could bring around that. But they have acknowledged they used a software to identify particular passengers and to bypass them so they could not, those passengers being city regulators, could not enforce the law. That has now been documented. It is also a fact that after the city, in a split vote, welcomed Uber into town and set up a regulatory scheme, Uber subsequently went to Salem to seek to preempt the city from having any further role in regulating them as a TNC. And in their effort in Salem, in the bill that they sponsored, they also proposed weakening consumer protections, preempting the city from enforcing its code, including protecting consumers, and in an interesting piece of what I would call regulatory overkill, seek to have forever the status of the drivers declared as a matter of law independent contractors. Fortunately, that legislation faced significant opposition, and including the city that opposed it, and Commissioner Saltzman testified against it. All of the statements I've just made are factually supported claims based on evidence in the record. And so I'm puzzled when Uber, through its paid professionals, makes claims about a politicized process or unfounded claims. I'm not even going to address the conduct that has been alleged outside of Portland around what I think can only be described as a sick corporate culture. A corporate culture that has led to Uber as a company bringing in an outside law firm to do a complete review of their compliance with Title VII, a corporate culture that has resulted in bombshell allegations about the treatment of women in the workplace, and, as has been noted in the report issued by PBOT, a corporate culture that has prompted the Department of Justice to begin a criminal inquiry. And they do not undertake such things lightly. So those are all claims that have been made. They are all factually supported. And I think some offense that the response by this company at the point in which a report was issued is to challenge the integrity of this body. I believe it is time that we authorized the subpoena. I think we have an obligation as a legislative body to follow the evidence wherever it takes us. And I frankly do not trust this company to make representations to legal counsel. We have a right to see the underlying documents around Grayball, and we have a right to make our own independent inquiry as to whether the company has engaged in illegal conduct. Dan, thank you for your strong leadership on this. This is a vote I am very proud to make. And in conclusion, because I get this sometimes from our critics, I happen to proudly carry the app of a company called Lyft on my phone. And it was placed there by someone in my office who said I should have it during inclement weather to have another option. I am not against companies that provide these services. I do have concerns about the documented behavior of one company called Uber. Aye.
Saltzman?
Well, I want to thank my colleagues for what I anticipate will be their support for these two items. This is about getting at the facts and ensuring that our public is being served in a safe and sound manner, and that our regulators have the ability to do their job to protect the public safety and to ensure that all riders in Portland have universal access to these services and are not being somehow discriminated by income level or zip code or any other sophisticated means that may be encompassed in the gray ball technology. And that's why I feel we are compelled to seek the subpoena, to see this information, to assure that we can do our job and we can protect our public. And so I thank my colleagues, and I also really wanted to, I thank people at PBOT and our city attorney's office earlier. I also want to thank Tia Williams in my office for doing an outstanding job in organizing and helping to make sure this investigation was done in a timely manner and that we're at the point where we're at today. So thank you, Tia, for your work as well. Aye.
You, Daly?
I'm pleased to support this ordinance. I think I've had ongoing concerns about Uber and other sharing economy platforms rolling into town, flouting local laws, and seeing how far what they could get away with and how far they can push local governments. And I think it's time for us to show them how far they can push. I think I'm also puzzled when people come to give testimony in front of this body and blame us for the actions of past councils. We have 2 people sitting here that voted against the Uber ordinance and 2 people that weren't on council. And I guess I just have to get used to being part of an entity that gets part of that phenomenon, although I resent it. And I think it's meaningful that Commissioner Saltzman is the one to bring this forward, because he's supported Uber in the past and is now doing his job to protect the public. Aye.
Fritz?
An interesting conversation last week with Tom Chamberlain of the Oregon AFL-CIO, and he is working with some of the, and I agree with Mr. Johnson, sharing economy is not at all descriptive of what these companies do. He's working with some of the drivers who, having been lured into working for Uber and Lyft, especially Uber, then suddenly found that Uber slashed prices, which meant that they had to work even longer hours in order to make a decent living. And in fact, many of them do work full-time for it, with no benefits and no much less ability to affect their own future than if they worked for a traditional taxi cab company. So I found that interesting. Obviously, it's a group of employees who don't even get the respect of being called employees, who are reaching out to unions saying, how can we push back against this giant who's in our country, and in our city, indeed. So I appreciate that assistance, and thank you, Commissioner Saltzman, for your leadership on this. Aye.
Wheeler?
I'd like to add my thanks. Commissioner Saltzman and his team, I think, did an exemplary effort of putting together the framework for this conversation and the framework for an investigation. I want to thank those at the staff level in the bureaus who worked very hard to provide us with factual and accurate information. And I want to reflect that going into this subpoena situation should always be a last resort for us. But as regulators, this is a tool that we need to be able to ensure that we're doing our jobs. And Commissioner Fish did a great job of laying out the facts. The reason we are doing this is we need access to documents that we believe are there that support what is already on the factual record in terms of an effort to circumvent local regulators and local regulations. and therefore we need access to this information. And this is the tool that we have at our disposal as a local city council to gain access to the information to which we're entitled. So it brings me and my colleagues no pleasure to have to do this, but this is what we have to do to get the information we need in order to be effective regulators of this market. So I strongly support the effort you brought forth, Commissioner Saltzman, and I join my colleagues in voting aye. So the ordinance is now adopted, and I will now call the vote on 468, which is the resolution. I don't know if people have anything else to add, but we need to vote for that separately. So if you could call the roll on 468, the resolution.
Fish?
Yeah, I'm going to vote aye on this, and it is, I think, the council's hope that within about 2 weeks, we'll have a separate ordinance and companion resolution that comes to council that delegates to the Revenue Bureau the authority to issue administrative subpoenas and to make some additional proposed changes to code. Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye, the resolution is adopted. Please call the next item.
Item 469, authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Tabor Powell Sewer Rehabilitation Phase 2, project number E10382, for an estimated $1,875,000.
Commissioner Fish.
Mayor, it's a little unusual for the commissioner in charge to pass the buck to a backbencher, but I'll do it.
It's in the spirit of cooperation.
I will do my
collaboration.
very best as the recovering commissioner in charge of the Bureau. This project in Southeast Portland is part of the Bureau of Environmental Services Phase 2 Sewer Rehabilitation Program to replace and to repair highly deteriorated sewer pipes. The project calls for a variety of repairs and rehabilitation at a total of about 3 miles of sewer pipe. It will protect the public health, property, and our environment by increasing sewer system capacity and reliability and reducing the risk of sewage releases to homes, businesses, and streets. If approved, construction would begin in September and last about a year. We're joined today by Bill Ryan and Colleen Harold from BES. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. As Commissioner Fish
Turn that
said,
mic
I'm
on,
Bill
someone
Ryan.
turn it off.
I'm the Chief Engineer.
I'm sorry, is the green light on there? There you go.
I'm sorry. I am Bill Ryan. I am the Chief Engineer for the Bureau of Environmental Services. And with me today is Colleen Harold, who is the project manager for this very exciting project. She's got a presentation to describe the project a little more, and afterward we can answer any questions you may have. Colleen?
Thank you so much. We're here today to ask for the authorization to approve the ordinance to advertise the $1.87 million contract for Tabor Powell Sewer Rehabilitation Project. This is the 31st project in 39 planned in the large-scale program. There's 165,000 feet of pipe already constructed or rehabilitated to date in this program. The total expenditures through the third quarter of 2017 equal $98.4 million. The Tabor Powell 2 project is made up of 2 distinct districts or areas. They're shown in green on the map, nestled within the large-scale sewer rehab program projects that are in yellow. The southernmost project is bounded on the north side by Powell, on the west side by 42nd Avenue, on the east by 74th Avenue, and on the south by Holgate and Foster. The northerly green project is bounded on the north side by I-84, on the west by 42nd, on the east by 66th Avenue, and on the south by Stark Street. These are your favorite slides. I know they are. They're mine too. This project replaces or rehabilitates highly deteriorated sewer pipes. This really allows me to be a forensic scientist when it comes to sewer and really determine whether a pipe is in or out of the scope of my work. The top 2 examples are typical mainline pipe defects, and they show deteriorated pipe that needs repair. The bottom 2 are lateral defects that show holes in pipes and roots that really inhibit flow to the main line. By replacing or rehabilitating mains, sewer laterals, and manholes, this project will protect public health, property, and the environment, increase sewer system capacity and reliability, and most importantly, reduce risk and sewage releases to homes and businesses. Some statistics about our project. There's 67 pipe segments in this work, close to 3 miles of pipe planned for rehabilitation by Cured in Place, UV. There's 14,313 linear feet in this project alone, with a small amount to be open cut, 431 feet. 6 spot repairs, and the pipe ranges from 8-inch to 36-inch diameter. The vintage of the pipe is 1905 to 1955. It makes 112 years old as the oldest pipe in the project. 70% are in residential streets with 30% in major roadways. PI. Outreach for the suite of the Tabor Pell projects began in 2014. It covers 4 projects. It covers the Tabor project in Phase 1, the Powell in Phase 1, CIPP Southeast in Phase 2, and now Tabor Pell 2 in Phase 2. Work for all of the 4 projects has been tracked with the public on mapping, including online and through print. Since all 4 projects are within the same geographical area and boundaries, and some in the same streets in many cases, we determined that trying to communicate each individual project separately would be too confusing. So rolling it up in the information into ongoing communications as a whole would be more effective, so that's what they did. Work for these projects has been communicated to the public as phases of one ongoing project, with this being the last. Tabor Pell 2 will follow work on the same streets as in Phases 1, and so representing them as the single program as 2 phases with multiple, single program as with multiple phases has been easier to understand for the public. As the Phase 1 projects, we have continued our partnership with coordination with various neighbors and businesses. We have Providence Hospital that we've been working closely with to access their campus for our work and performing the maintenance and repairs that's needed on their property. We have also worked with Portland Nursery around their large, popular annual Apple Festival on Stark Street. BES PI staff has been providing monthly and quarterly updates to neighbors and businesses by mail. And a noise permit has been issued and received by us for the project following all requirements of the noise office. We received no comments in opposition to the project, and communications received were about schedule, types of work, the construction methods, and we also requested from some neighbors to be added to the email list. This is a really exciting project for BES and for me personally. I've worked hard to specify this as the UV cure only project. So we've specified that as the method of cure. It's an innovative sewer rehabilitation method that offers distinct advantages to the city. This is the first project that allows the city to gain experience and knowledge using this method. To date, it has been successfully installed on several smaller projects. They're using it on the Yamhill Morrison job currently. Half of the project is UV. We also used it on the First and Madison courthouse pipe that was included in the development project. We believe this project will showcase this technology as viable and economical rehabilitation method. We have extensive experience with thermal cure, but not with UV, and we really want to try it. With thermal cure, we know that there's styrene odor. With UV, there is no odor, at least not styrene. There is a slightly smaller equipment footprint that we look forward to sort of tracking and making sure it's smaller than the thermal. We've worked with to contract potential vendors and contractors to assure a competitive pool will bid this project. 6 potential contractors indicate that they will be primes and bid this project. They have been directed to procurement to go through the pre-qual requirements. Lastly and finally, the engineer's estimate again is $1,875,000. The level of confidence is high. This represents our best professional estimate of what this will cost. The pricing of the UV work is less certain simply because we have less experience with this technology. Lastly, we will begin construction in September, and our construction duration is 325 days. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions before we move to public testimony? Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very
Can I
good.
just make one comment, Mayor?
Yes, please, Commissioner Fish.
Commissioner Fritz, we had that slide in there for your benefit because as our professional overseeing the project noted, we're using a UV technology. And it actually is very exciting. The curing goes on inside with ultraviolet light. And among the benefits is a more durable outcome with less odor.
So why is that especially for me?
Because you asked me once about.
No, because you and I, over the course of 8 or 9 years, have had many conversations about ultraviolet fill in the blank.
Oh, got it, yeah.
All right, good. Seeing no further questions or comments, thank you for the presentation. This is a non-emergency first reading. It moves to second. Colleagues, could I suggest we go through the second readings? There are 4 of them quickly, and then let's stop because I'm sure people would like to take a break prior to, we have a fairly lengthy agenda this afternoon.
Bill, could you come back at 2 and we'll do 470?
Okay.
Okay.
So let's do this. First of all, 475 is being rescheduled to May 24th, so I'll just state that for the record. So 475 is off the agenda. Carla, could you please call item number, sorry?
Before you move, could I make
Please.
a suggestion?
Yeah.
The things that we have this afternoon are going to take quite some time too. Commissioner Fish, is this accepting the report, the 470, is that something that needs to be done today, or could we put that over till next week?
No, we've actually rescheduled it 3 times. 4th would be the
Okay.
charm. Bill, could we do that? Could we put it over next week?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so 470 will be returned to my office, or actually continue to next week, Carla?
Yes, continued.
Very good.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz.
Yeah, and colleagues, I've noticed that we've been way off on the estimates of presentations, and I think we've undershot in terms of public testimony. And I think I can hold people to tighter constraints around public testimony as well. I think between all of those 3 things, while I've got the bureaus, I will work with all of our bureau leadership to talk about getting clearer estimates and a clearer understanding of how long these presentations will actually take, if that's okay.
And Mayor, I don't know what our practice is, but on the time certains, I think it is the Bureau's obligation to guesstimate the amount of public testimony.
Yeah,
And
very,
I think
very
we all
good.
have a sense about certain issues being more controversial than others.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, yeah, I think we can work that out. So if you wouldn't mind, Carla, could read item 471, please?
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for the construction of the Northwest Industrial Street and 28th Avenue Sewer Rehabilitation Project number E10782 for an estimated $2 million.
Is there further discussion on the part of the council? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. Adopted. 472, please.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Slabtown Sewer Replacement Project, number E10663, for an estimated $8.86 million.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The solicitation and contract is approved. Could you please call item 473?
Authorize a competitive solicitation for security services for the Smart Park garages and the Portland Streetcar facility at an estimated amount of $4 million for 5 years.
Is there any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The solicitation is approved. And then I think there was one more. Yes, 477, please.
Authorize $73,996 total in grant agreements for the Office of Neighborhood Involvement East Portland Action Plan 2017 Civic Engagement Grant Agreements to further community involvement.
Is there any further comment or discussion? Commissioner Fish? No. Call the roll, please.
Fish.
Aye.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
It's the very definition of devoted staff that Laura Wintergreen has been sitting here all morning to make sure that we all said yes. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The grant agreement is approved. So colleagues, what we'll do, we'll reach out to your offices with regard to the rest of the agenda. I'll just put the thought in your head. There may be time Thursday of this week at 3:30. Alternatively, we can just push it off until next week. So think on that, and we'll touch base with your staff.
Good morning. To get out the construction bids, accepting the bids.
Very good. All right, we're adjourned. So Mustafa, can you work?